Welcome everyone to the season finale of Draft on Tap. I'm looking at that open and I said I should have re-edited that with all the players the Bears drafted. Damn, I don't have my fastball anymore. Anyway, just want to let you know that we have lots of programming available on demand for you to check out, either on our audio podcast network, just search Barroom Network wherever you get your podcasts, or here on our YouTube channel. All of our live programming is stored under the live tab when you go to Barroom Network here on YouTube. And so you can check out any of the past shows that I've had with Danny, with Greg Gabriel, our live Bears coverage, the stuff I do with Tooch. If you're interested in hockey, there's an outstanding show called Bar Down with Vinny Parisi and Frank Mueller. And there's the Barfly Tailgate shows. There's tons of stuff there that you can take a look at and hopefully find something to your liking. So with that, I'm going to introduce a gentleman who has started his own YouTube channel, and it is going really well. Danny Shimon, you loaded some stuff on today.
Yeah, I've been going through some of the Bears draft picks and the ones that I hadn't already posted up there. So I've got Kyle Monangai, I've got Ozzy Trapilo. Today I put up Ruben Hyppolite, the linebacker from Maryland. Shemar Turner's coming up. Zack Frazier's coming up, and we'll do one on Luther Burden III as well as the kid from Michigan State.
Well, I think that's where we should start, is reviewing each of these players. People are coming into the chat, Jay Grizz, J2K, K, and more. 51 people watching across all our three platforms. We are on Facebook, we are on X, and of course here on YouTube. Let's start there. I'd love to get your review now that the draft is over. We're kind of starting to truly absorb stuff. I'd love you to encapsulate each of the draft picks, but also then you and I can have a discussion of whether that was the best guy in our opinion, in your opinion, my opinion, and the people in the chat. Let's play that exercise. But first and foremost, want to get the lowdown on some of these players from you. Let's start at the top with Colston Loveland.
Yeah, I love this player. I like this when watching his tape. I mean, he was one of the ones that really caught my eye in terms of early on. And going into this process, I talked about the Bears are going to draft a tight end, and in my opinion, was they were going to draft the best tight end that was going to complement Cole Kmet, because I wasn't ready to move on from Cole Kmet, and I feel like Colston Loveland was the best tight end to complement Cole Kmet. Obviously there was Mason Taylor, and later on in rounds, and there's Aja Arroyo, and so on and so forth, in a really deep draft class. And I know that the top tight end was Tyler Warren from Penn State, but he was more of a like a all around tight end, and again, someone similar to in terms of Cole Kmet. He wasn't as dynamic, and that's one thing I use a lot when talking about Colston Loveland is just a dynamic, pass catcher, and his ability to make big plays in the passing game. And, start off first with the size, 6'6", 250 pounds, has 32-inch arms. So he gives you that big, huge catch rate. He's this guy that can go downfield and go up and pluck the ball out of the air over defenders. Terrific route runner, easy mover in terms of in space, loose hips. Really, because at times you looked at him and you see a big receiver here, and you see him running away from defenders. And then you really catch, this season, it was really frustrating watching his tape, because there are times where he runs a great route. He's wide open, but the quarterback in Michigan doesn't even look at it his way. So you go back and take a look at 2023 tape where he's got J.J. McCarthy, and now you see a lot more of what Colston Loveland can do there, and his ability to, again, stretch the seam, get downfield. If he's got one-on-one matchup with the safety, he's a guy that again, the big catch rate is that length, that size, can go up and make a play on a football. So, the only thing, I feel like he can get better at is that inline blocking. Now, he's not horrible, but he's a guy that I think he's got to get bigger, get stronger to be able to be better equipped in terms of inline blocker. But I mean, that's something that obviously you could do easily. So it's not a worry or a concern or anything like that. But yeah, I think that was the one thing we saw here was the Bears at speed on both sides of the ball. They had dynamic playmakers, and they started off here first with Colston Loveland in that first round.
I'm calling up here the draft so that we can discuss some of the players the Bears bypass. So you mentioned Tyler Warren. one of the guys that you and I both really liked a lot at the 10th spot was the defensive end, Michael Williams.
Yeah.
Did the Bears make a mistake in going for a tight end? Because I've looked at how this board fell every which way. And in my opinion, as much as I am impressed with what Loveland is and can become, my opinion, Michael Williams would have helped the board fall a little bit better for the Bears, and you would have got a defensive end who could play with Dennis Allen for the next 10 years.
Yeah, and that's we called it on draft night, right? That's the player that I'm gonna like keep an eye on and say, all right, man, like, this could be one that they might regret in terms of letting Michael Williams go on. And then as you said earlier, once the draft is over, a lot of these stories come on, and then it turns out that the 49ers were trying to trade up ahead of the Bears, ahead of the Saints actually, because that was where the spot where Michael Williams was being projected to go, and try and get him, and they just weren't able to trade up, and then lo and behold, it just falls to them. And that's the thing about Michael Williams. And if you guys follow me this whole process, he is one of my favorite in terms of defensive players. Him and his teammate Jalen Walker were both sitting there looking at the Bears, and Walker, while dynamic in terms of as an edge player, but just wasn't the right in terms of traits and fits and all that stuff. So that I can understand why they might have passed on him. But Walker, like you said, Williams fits that mold. Long edge, a good first step, plays the run very well. Still 21 years old, only going to get better. And this is a guy that, again, his future, his best pass rush ability, his best production is it's in front of him, right? And I think the 49ers are going to be benefiting from that, and especially now he's got Bosa on the opposite side of him, so he's not going to have the pressure on him. So I think Michael Williams should have a good career here moving forward, possibly even a great career. But for me, like I always projected him because with those traits he had, I project him as a potential impact NFL pass rusher. So yes, that is a player that we're going to keep an eye on here, and I think that's something that could come back and haunt Poles and Ben Johnson and later on in the future. But again, not taking away anything from Colston Loveland, I just think that if you had taken Michael Williams with a 10th pick, you could have come back around in the second round, maybe, right? But he was gone by the 39th pick. But maybe Mason Taylor could have been something you could have moved up for in the second round. Elijah Arroyo would have been there for you in the second or third round. Another those explosive tight ends that can get downfield. So not the type of obviously production, and also with Arroyo is a big injury concern in terms of what has happened in the last couple of seasons in Miami, but still a guy that could come in and be a nice pass catching threat. Now, not the type of threat that Colston Loveland will be, but still, if you got the defensive end that could be your cornerstone on defense, and then you get a nice move tight end in the second or third round, I think that could have worked out as well. But either way, I think both Loveland and Michael Williams are going to have good careers. It's just a matter of could you have gone with Michael Williams first and maybe got a different tight end? That's something that we'll have to kind of pay attention to.
Yeah, I mean, I studied this thing left and right, and you named the players. You named the two players who the Bears could have acquired in the second round, trading up or even just waiting for Arroyo to drop. It could have happened, and so I think it's important for us fans to try to intellectualize a little bit about what could have happened, because here it is. Back in December, when the Bears offensive line was getting crucified, I went back to see who in that first draft that, Danny, you were upset that they chose two defensive backs in the second round. And so I'm looking down the list and I saw, I know this offensive lineman, he's damn good. He's damn. Now, whether they would have been system fits, I don't know for sure. I'm not the expert on that, but that there were some quality offensive linemen, trench players, both offensive and defensive, that they bypassed to attack the defensive backfield. I think that was a mistake. And so I want to try to foreshadow or foresee if they've made a mistake this season. There's two defensive tackles that they passed up that I wouldn't mind at number 10, Darius Alexander and the kid from Walter Nolan. And so those two guys, did we make a mistake? Colston Loveland is going to be a good tight end, but wouldn't it have been better to follow the plan, which is build from the trenches out?
Yeah, and I think Nolan could have been possibly there at 10. I think he went 17 or 16 over to the Cardinals, but
Right.
I think Alexander, you could have, Darius Alexander could have gotten obviously in second or third round because he went top of the third round. But yeah, I mean in terms of Nolan, I mean he could have been someone there, perfect three technique. But the questions with Nolan obviously was consistencies on tape. You saw he had a great season at Ole Miss last year. Was at Texas A&M. And then transfer over to Ole Miss and was really tremendous. He's a ideal three technique, and he was a little under 300 pounds. So they may be something that they looked at. I'm not sure. Maybe the consistencies on tape is something they looked at. Had a tremendous Senior Bowl week, right? And that's where he kind of cemented his first round stock. So yeah, that would have been a fit at defensive tackle. But for me, it higher on my board would have been Michael Williams. So if that's why we were doing the draft, and I said, all right, I'm like, this is Jalen Walker or Michael Williams right here are sitting here looking at the Bears, and if either one of these guys, I think it would be an excellent selection. And obviously, I think Colston Loveland was the surprise. Everyone was surprised that they went tight end because everybody thought if they go tight end, they go Tyler Warren. But for me, it's like if you're going to go tight end, go Colston Loveland. But if you're going to say
you've said that for months,
yeah, if you're going to go play other than tight end, it had to be Michael Williams or Jalen Walker, one of those two guys. So, yeah, that's something that could come back and we'll revisit it. Right, we'll go back like you did, the previous draft and kind of look and see what happened and where it is. And there's going to be some things where you can debate here and there, but I truly do believe that with Ben Johnson here and with the vision he has and how he's going to utilize the tight end, I do feel like Colston Loveland is going to have a successful career here with Chicago. Obviously healthy, stays healthy for God willing, moving forward. But I just Michael Williams will be that guy that I think we're all going to always go back and say, all right, damn, like the Bears could have had that guy because I do feel like Michael Williams is going to be an impact NFL pass rusher.
Yeah. Well, and what about Jared Verse last year, right? He was available when we picked Roma Dunze. Now, again, Roma Dunze is going to be a really good NFL player. Could be a great one. But, are we going to build from the trenches or not?
Right. And the only thing I think that what saves them now, what saves the Bears is they invested so much in the offensive line, on the interior of the offensive line. All right. So I think that kind of allowed them to kind of look maybe, look at the outskirts in terms of upgrading there. Obviously, all three tackles were gone, and which was fine, whatever. But then, defensive line, and they got the kid from Indy, Ode Domingo, and then I think he's going to start off at edge, but then kick him inside. And the other thing I think we forget about, and this is something that I always try to remind myself is I was high on this kid last year. Is Austin Booker as his second year in the league. Remember, guys, he was a redshirt sophomore, came out last year out of Kansas, and really, went to the Senior Bowl and really had a tremendous week. And I think that's what propelled him to be a 4th round pick for the Bears. So I think they, have good a higher or hope, I should say. They still have hope for Austin Booker, and I do as well. So I think that's something we can't lose sight of. So we'll see how they kind of went and said, all right, well, we're not going to get a tight end, as Colston Loveland's ability in the second round. You're going to get a good tight end like Mason. I'm a huge Mason Taylor fan. But the thing is, like, could we get a Michael Williams? There's no way you're going to get a Michael Williams in second. So I think if I had to guess, that's what they kind of went back and forth with. And obviously you have an offensive minded head coach now. He's going to want to propel, the quarterback and his offense and all that stuff. So now if Eberflus was the defensive coordinator, we might have seen a different outcome in terms of who got selected, whether it was Williams or Colston Loveland. So you go get Ben Johnson, you give him all that money, and you got to let him build the offense the way he wants it. And he stresses that he needs a tight end like Colston Loveland that he himself compared to a Sam Laporta from Detroit. So you're gonna have to go with your head coach and let him do that. And the one thing that we studied this on the draft night, all 3 nights, and I looking at the class right now. I want to reemphasize again, this was a Ben Johnson-led draft, right? Him and his staff, they had a huge input on this. Obviously, Poles and his staff, the scouts help kind of inform them of all the players' traits, all the bells and whistles in terms of off the field, what the player excels in. And I think once the tape, the coaches got into the tape, they started forming their own opinions. And I think this, as we go through it, I think we'll find out this was a coaching staff led draft. And I kind of anticipated it because, again, follow the money, right? Who makes more money here? Ben Johnson is that face of that organization right now, right? And I think you got to let him do his thing. And And that's one thing now is it's like if this pick goes bad, I take less responsibility from polls. I put it more on Ben Johnson, and that's a scenario because that's how I feel. I feel in my mind that Ben Johnson was the catalyst behind a lot of these picks, him and his staff.
Well, let's. I want to have a good, deep discussion on that, but let's table it for now. We'll get back to it. Let's get back to our board. You evaluating players, but before we do that, MC Fact says, Danny, do you know what Loveland's real 40 time is? Because I don't think there is an official Loveland 40 time.
No, he didn't run a 40 because of the shoulder injury. He wasn't able to do it, but the estimate is he's a 4.6 guy, either 4.62, 4.65 in that range.
Oh wow. I was hoping for a little faster.
Well. But at 6'6", 250 pounds, a 4.6 is not bad,
True, indeed. All right, let's get your thoughts on a very controversial pick, becoming more and more controversial by the minute, and that's the wide receiver out of Mizzou. At number 39 of the second round, Luther Burden III was criticized after day one. Stuff started to come out. Steve Smith was talking. In fact, I got a clip here. Let me share it with you before you get to your analysis of him. Steve Smith on his podcast was critical of Luther Burden III. Today on the Score Sports Radio, the new hosts of the show, the new afternoon show, they asked Elijah Drinkwitz, Burden's coach in college, about what Smith said. And again, this is Steve Smith and then WSCR.
Teams that went to his pro day, and he showed up exactly what some people said he was, which was he wasn't the best version of himself that you want to see and invest in millions of dollars. If he doesn't get the ball when he believes he should, becomes unfocused.
Who did that?
Steve Smith, former wide receiver. NFL
He's got his own issues. He's got his own issues to worry about. I'm not worried about somebody else's opinion about Luther Burden's tape. The Chicago Bears liked the tape enough and believed in it. He's an all-conference player, all-American player. Everybody's got haters and critics. So, I don't really care.
So, Danny, as you're doing your evaluation of Burden, if you could also comment on these stories that if he doesn't have the rock, he takes a mini vacation.
Yeah, no, and that's honest, because I saw the same thing, and I'm looking at my notes here, and one of my in terms of weaknesses, deliberate get off, does not explode out of the gate when the ball's not coming his way. So you could see some of that on his tape, and but you can also see some of the things that the Bears liked on his tape as well: the explosiveness, the ability, the 4.41 speed, the ability to from the slot be able to get downfield and also after the catch. So we talk about Yak in terms of yards after the catch, and this guy gives you some of that. He's got that punt return ability, he's got the stop start ability to be able to make guys miss, juke, and take it to the house. So that's the one thing with Burden that he'll give this offense that they didn't have, right? And this is a guy that you throw a ball to, it's a quick slip screen, give the ball to him and let him do his thing in terms of make things happen on his own. So, that's the positive about him. Now, the other thing is, we talked about the route running and some of the things that Steve Smith highlighted. And I agree with Steve Smith. Like I'm telling you, I see the same things that he did. Now, the whole pro day stuff, that's different. Talked about, he didn't go out there and run routes for his quarterback and all that stuff. So, it did seem like there was some sort of issue there offensively with either the quarterback or play caller or whatnot. But, he's a guy, again, has that big play potential, electric with the ball in his hands, will give this offense something they didn't have, and especially if you line him up in the slot. And the one thing that we mentioned, we talked about, you and I, Aldo, and with John as well, was, this was something that looks like, Antwan Raymond was that this is his little project, right? And we saw the clips into the draft room, when the pick was made, and you saw Randall L hugging, Brian Poles and hugging Ben Johnson, and high-fiving some of the other, scouting staff and coaching staff. So this had Antwan Randall L backing, and he knows that this is going to be something that he's got to bring out of this guy. But if Burden, who coming into the season was one of the top-rated receivers in his entire draft class, he was coming off of a 1,200-yard receiving season and 9 touchdowns. I got half that amount of yardage this year, and 676 receiving yards. only 6 touchdowns this year. So, 2024. So there was a bit of a down year for him. But this is something that Antwan Raymond, I believe, he went there, and just judging from his reaction on that draft cam, that he pounded a table for him, and he wanted Burden, and he felt like, I will get the best out of this kid. And the Bears do. You're going to have a special player. Again, speed, ability to make guys miss in the open field, just adding a different dimension, just similar with Colston Loveland, another guy that gives you that dynamic ability down the football field, and Burden gives it to you as well. So, did I expect him to go? I expected him to draft a receiver. Did I expect him to go early second round with the receiver? But I didn't. But I think that the value on the board was just too good for them to pass up. And the one thing that kind of watching the draft and kind of rewatching it on some of these replays, it's evident that the Bears had targeted, in my opinion, one of those Ohio State running backs. And when both those guys were gone, they targeted Burden right away, and then they traded out of that 41st pick. So I think that affected how they drafted. But the fact that they went Burden right away, I think they had him high on their board. I think with the backing of Antwan Raymond, I think that they're confident they're going to get him there. And if one of those Ohio State running backs was still there, I think they would have stayed there at 41 and taken one of those guys as well.
Okay, great point. So because you brought that up, now I want to play this video for you from the press conference. This is, I think it's Dan Wiederer asking Ryan Poles. It looks like the running back board got away.
An honor roll student with a.
That's not it. Here it
I
is.
like the running back board was kind of dancing away from you a bunch of times throughout the last 48 hours. Can you kind of describe the dynamic of that? And is there any sort of human nature frustration that comes with kind of having to dance that dance?
Yeah, I've always felt that. I mean, every draft has like just pockets that you just don't fall into. And again, if you're going to be disciplined and you're going to let the board kind of dictate how you do things, it just happens that way. So because of that, you end up in some really cool situations and really acquiring talented players. It might come from a different position that maybe you would have liked to. But at the end of the day, you're increasing the talent on your football team. And I do think you can get into a lot of trouble if you start trying to manipulate things to get into certain pockets where you end up hurting your team long term.
Didn't it sound to you like, well, it looked like to me that when you say this is Ben Johnson's draft, Ben Johnson at that very moment looked at him when he was basically saying, I'm sticking to the board. Yeah, and maybe, I'm just speculating here, maybe Ben Johnson has trouble with how loyal Poles is to the board. What do you think?
You got that from the press conference, from the comment from Poles, or did you got it from like just the body language, or how did you get that?
The body language.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting, and a lot of people have criticized me for that, calling me names and stuff. And so maybe
it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. I'm reading too much into it, perhaps. But when he said, we're looking, we're studying the board, we're keeping the board the way it is, we're loyal to the board speaks to us. At that moment, I edited that reaction shot of Ben Johnson looking at him. I didn't put it out of place. He looked exactly at him when he was saying that, and the look said to me, God damn it, I wish he would have traded up for my guy Travion. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. I see some people in the chat are saying the same thing.
I didn't get that from the press conference, that feel like or the vibe that you got, but okay. I definitely think that they were targeting running back. Obviously, we all heard the rumors about them trying to go up for Ashton Gentina. I truly believe they were trying, right? Mm-hmm. But they just the cost was just too much. They couldn't afford to do that because they had other things they had to do on offense and defense as well. So I think they tried to do that. I think they were hoping one of the Ohio State backs fell to them, and when they're both gone, I think that's when they're like, all right, let's get Burden, let's get out of here and see where we get later on. What surprised me though, Aldo, and this is where maybe we're on the same page here, is it's such a deep running back class, and you wait till the 7th round to make a selection.
Yes!
So none of the other running backs tickled your fancy. Nothing. I mean, that's why I don't get you draft a linebacker in the 4th round. there's no running backs there that maybe you could have worked with. And again, we don't know what's going to happen post draft. We talked about, maybe Nick Chubb coming in that started picking up steam after the draft. So that could be something, but again, that's a 1 year, rental kind of thing. And maybe they just agree that none of the other players, the backs that they're in that class, I thought were a lot of talented backs in this class, but maybe none of them just fit right. That's the one question that I couldn't get my finger on in terms of, none of these other backs tickled your fancy up until the 7th round. So that's the kind, but definitely I'm pretty sure, obviously not 100%, but I'm pretty sure obviously they're trying to get Genty, but I think those two Ohio State backs were sitting there, and maybe that's the regret they might have, is maybe like, let's go get them. Maybe there was a trade and they could have jumped somebody and he didn't pull a trigger on that trade. That could have been something maybe. But once those 3 guys were gone, Genty and the 2 Ohio State backs, it just, at least for me, seemed like they weren't interested in anybody else, because they didn't even try to bring anybody else. I mean, again, a 4th round, it was the 4th or 5th round where they traded back down with the Rams, and I was trying to see what 2 backs went, and this is just us speculating, right?
Sure, exactly.
Tune from Virginia Tech went, and then Cam Scatterbo, your guy, went to the Giants, and then the Bears traded down. So do you want to assume maybe those guys were looking at? But again, if you're looking at Cam Scatterbo, if you're looking at Tune, both guys, are productive last year, but both guys had, ball security issues. Like I don't get like why no other back would have worked, for you. So I don't know. Maybe the board had those 2 guys higher than whoever did. This is why I wish I was a fly in these draft war rooms.
Oh my gosh, I would pay.
I just sit there and listen to the talk and the points and the strategy and the back and forth. And, was Eric Bieniemy not fighting pound on the table for any of these guys? Could he have been like, what, I'm not, any of these guys are not something I'm going to sit here and pound the table for. And it's like, oh, let's go get this, So a lot of things we could talk about, but I didn't get the vibe you got, but I definitely got the vibe that they wanted either Genty or those 2 Ohio State backs. And once they're all gone, they kind of just ignored it, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, it was it felt like it was a bit chaotic in that draft room. And I started laughing when you brought up Bieniemy, because, he's got this reputation of being really, really tough on players. I wonder if he was in draft meetings and he's swearing and pounding the table, you better effing get this guy at running back and blah, blah, blah. My mind went out of control there. But to your point about – go ahead. Please.
Sorry, the one thing about the board – the one thing that they both said, both Johnson and Poles, the coaching staff and the scouting staff set the board together. So they're all in agreement on the board.
Exactly.
So,
yes.
So if there was a preference by Poles on a certain player or players, you would think that's all evened out and there's some sort of compromise before they go into the draft, right? They set their board where everyone's in agreement, everyone's to talk. They're all right. This player is this player, this spot, this player is this spot, this player is spot. So if you're sticking to your board and you're going off about what the board says, remember, you guys all, came together and put this board together. So that's why I think I don't buy that part of it. But yeah, definitely there's 3 backs that I know they wanted. And once they didn't get them, they were like, hands off for some reason.
Brandon, I got your question. I'm going to store it because we're going to go down sequentially, numerically, whatever, down this board. And the next player is Ozzy Trapilo, the offensive tackle from Boston College. I think you mentioned his name in the very first show that we did this season, Danny, and I know that you've done more work on him since then. What do you think about Ozzy Trapilo now that you've gathered all this information?
Yeah, at that point in the draft, as I'm going through this exercise, all right, who would I rather have here? Who would I rather have there? Blah, blah, blah. When we get to the Ozzy Trapilo pick, that's the guy I wanted at that pick. And mainly because you needed someone that can come in and compete, in my opinion, compete at left tackle next year. And Trapilo was, at least for me, was the last remaining guy. Now, you say, oh, Danny, you just said left tackle. Yeah. Trapilo played left tackle his first 2 seasons at Boston College. His last 2 seasons played at right tackle. Now, I posted a scouting report on Shimon Draft Scout on Trapilo. I posted clips of him playing left tackle, and I posted clips of playing right tackle. And I obviously, when he's playing left tackle, he's a sophomore, right? So there's more development here at the last couple seasons. And the one thing I look at Trapilo is he's a technician. This guy he doesn't have all the, the athletic traits that you look for premier tackles in the league, but he's got the size at 6'8", 316 pounds. Our arms are not great in terms of length, but they're 33. They're doable. But he gets to his set spots on time. He has a knack in terms of being able to just square up the defensive alignment and just kind of lock him up and not let him get past them. Or if they do get his outside shoulder, he does a nice job of just using their momentum and then riding them past the quarterback in the pocket. So again, this is, I think, someone that they needed to get. His experience at both left and right tackle makes him, in my opinion, a valuable piece, because going into next season, obviously we know left tackle, it's a big question mark. Braxton Jones with the injury, he won't be available to play until mid-August sometime. Not talking about getting into the preseason. Karan Amargaji, I believe, like, he's got a clean slate. He's coming in, he's being judged by this new coaching staff. We'll see how that goes there. But you needed someone to compete there. The one thing after watching Trapilo's tape and after scouting him and producing my report, I'm confident he will be starting for the Bears next year at tackle. Which side? I don't know. That's the key. If he goes in and he kicks ass in training camp and he proves that he can play left tackle, I think he's a starting left tackle for you next year, right? Ahead of Karan Amargaji. That's for me. That's early on here. What is it? April 30th. I think that's because that's how I feel like his technique, and he's just sound in terms of his pass blocking ability. Now, if they feel like, he can't handle left tackle, and I know Dan Rochard talked about, in terms of, higher, taller tackles have a tendency to lift up, pad levels and play, more in terms of, bending from the waist and get elevated, lose leverage. He said he's going to work on that. So, hopefully that's the case, and he can get him, to play with better pad level and keep his knees bent on a more consistent basis. But I'm telling you, this kid's going to start next year for the Bears. He's going to be a starting tackle. I just don't know if it's going to right side or left side. Now, obviously, if it's on right tackle, that means that they've done the thing that you and I have talked about, and I think we both agree that it's not the right thing to do, because you're hurting possibly two slots. They'll probably move Darnell right over to left tackle if that's the case. So, but this kid is a guy that with this pick, I think was the pick. There was no one else there I wanted. The kid that went earlier to Houston from Minnesota, Ursay, I think we have all talked about him on draft night. He's not someone I was high on in terms of, athletic ability, in terms of, how he's a guy I feel like he needs a lot of work project in terms of, he's got good length, good size. But it's got, for me, his body was just way out of shape. He's got to, work on that there. He went to Houston earlier, but I think Trapilo for me is a sound, very, very good pick. He's a second round pick, 56 overall. That means starter. That means immediate contributor. Whether left side or right side, I'm not sure, but he's starting next year.
One of the things that you said, Danny, and I caught it, and Kay did as well. He only had one season at Boston College where he was left tackle.
Two. Freshman and sophomore seasons.
Why am I not seeing that in Dane Brugler's or Ozzy's?
Yeah, he's at 36 starts. He came as a left tackle. He started playing left tackle, and then he started as a sophomore at left tackle. So maybe that's where the confusion is. But he played left tackle, and then Bill O'Brien was on the score. I believe it was yesterday, and he said that the reason why he switched him from left tackle to right tackle was because the kid they got that's probably going to come on next year is that he is a left-handed player, and he was more comfortable at left tackle. I forgot the kid's name, and so Trapilo, being the teammate and the team captain, said, "I'll move to right tackle because I'm comfortable with that." And then Trapilo also said in his press conference that he practices on both sides, because after the season he practices on left side and right side, so he's comfortable in either position. So he can go in or he can compete at either position.
Thanks for clearing that up. That's great news. And J2K says that you are correct. So there's confirmation there. Cliff Victoria says he loves Trapilo's footwork. He also says that camp is really going to decide, who's going to play and where they're going to play and so forth. And Braxton Jones will start camp at a disadvantage because he hasn't had an off season where he could weight train and so forth, because he's been rehabilitating his injury. And so he could be behind the 8 ball. Any situation, any way that you see Braxton Jones not on the roster, whether he's traded for a 7th round pick or just loses his job, and maybe because of injury, they don't want him anymore.
I don't honestly. I think so. Worst case scenario, because this is what they're telling us. They're telling us that he's to be back on the field in August. That's preseason, right? So that tells me there's no way this kid can go in there and compete, in my opinion, at least for a left tackle, unless they're just giving him the job. And from what they're saying, it's the best 5 guys out there. So you're gonna have to go out there and compete. So that's why, to me, Braxton Jones, if he's not the left tackle, he's not starting. To me, he's your swing tackle. He's your veteran swing tackle. I believe in the last year of his contract, at the very least, we can have him there as a veteran who could back up either side, and we can move on from there. So because again, with Kyle Monangai, he might be more of that developmental kind of prospect. And with this coaching staff, remember, they weren't here last year when Kyle was drafted, so they have no real loyalty. I know Poles drafted him, but there's no real loyalty to Kyle Monangai. So if they don't see Kyle Monangai as someone that they could play a left tackle or even right tackle or other position, I think he's more susceptible to being let go than a Braxton Jones, in my opinion. And I thought the one thing what we can talk about later, if we got time to get into the press conference and some of the things that Ben Johnson said that really kind of caught my attention in terms of some of the things he said. We'll discuss it with you in the chat.
Sounds good. Shemar Turner, 3rd round pick number 62. A little bit of a surprise. We didn't hear his name much during our draft research period. Not that we didn't do any work on him, but he was a little bit of a surprise to the Bears. And his injury history is a bit concerning. He's got a rod in one of his legs, but he did his pro day, as Ryan Poe said, and he did it well. So that gave him and the doctors had confidence that this wasn't going to be an issue. Tell me what you know about Shemar Turner after looking at more tape of him.
Yeah, and the one thing with Turner is he's a guy that 2 years ago, 2023, was playing defensive end, and so they play a 3-man front. So he was playing more of that 5 technique at Texas A&M, and he had a productive season. He had 6 sacks, 11 tackles for loss. So again, one of these other guys that was coming into the season as one of these better prospects at the position. And you put on his tape, and the one thing right away, kid's a twitchy, athletic, defensive tackle. He's a guy that plays hard. Mortar runs 100% all the time. And again, shows some of that ability to get up the field. The one thing he wasn't utilized in a way at Texas A&M, in my opinion, to go up the, attack a gap, get upfield and press and kind of, get after the quarterback. I think a lot of times his first step was lateral. It wasn't vertical. So I think in this scheme, I've always said, grade the flashes of a prospect, and when he flashes, again, he shows that twitchiness, the ability to get up into the gap with a swim move or that first quick step, and he can impact the running back or the quarterback or whatnot. And then when you grade that, you see what they see in him, right? And you see the athletic ability to be able to flow down the line, moving laterally. And again, some of that sack numbers wasn't there this year. Only had 2 sacks as opposed to 6 sacks last year. But again, he put on more weight. He moved inside. It's because they were able to get Texas A&M was able to bring in Nick Scorton from Purdue, who then he was playing defensive end. So Turner moved inside. But the flashes were there. There wasn't consistent. The sack numbers weren't there. And there's a lot of times I feel like he was being overpowered and mauled by double teams. So that's an area where he's going to have to get better at in terms of using his hand, in terms of leverage, leverage play and all that stuff. And that's stuff you can coaching him. But it's the athletic ability, the twitchiness, that first step get off, and projecting him at the next level. Instead of his first step being, east or west with the Bears, he's going to be hitting that gap and going vertical right away. And I think that's what they liked about him. Now he added some weight from what he was the previous year. So he's up to 290 at the combine. He was up to 290. So he was a little bit of a surprise for me. I knew he was ideal in terms of a 3 technique. But I think at least for me, I had Darius Alexander, the kid we mentioned earlier from Toledo, rated a little bit higher. And only because, 6'4", 305, longer arm, longer reach, 34-inch arms. Again, a guy that when you watch him, his ability to get up, show some twitch, not as twitch as Turner is, but show some twitch for a guy that's bigger. Also, ability to get up in the field, and you see some more in terms of repertoire. A swim move, a club, so on and so forth with Darius Alexander. So that's why I had to get a little bit of higher grade for him, and but for whatever reason they decided to go with Turner. And again, that's another thing with you having Grady Jarrett here. You take a kid like Turner who's got all that twitch, all that athletic ability. You put him under his wing and have him teach him now a pass rush repertoire. Have him teach him now how to take on double teams and be able to hold his ground on a consistent basis, right? So, and with that motor and with that the way he plays in terms of aggression, I think that's why they got excited with Turner and having Grady kind of take him under their wing, and then again the athletic ability combined there. I think that's why they went with Turner instead of a guy like, for example, Darius Alexander.
J2K says, I think Turner's issues with his hands have to do with him switching positions. He seems like he is in a bar fight instead of being in control and decisive. That's something easily coachable, huh?
Yeah, that's something coach. Also, J2K, I think also that's also an issue with him in terms of run defense as well. You see a lot of times that he lets the offensive lineman get into his chest and turn him and move him. He's a much more stronger, much more aggressive player that way. And I think that's one thing that also they could probably coach up and get him better there in terms of being a run defender.
Indeed. Slick says he has to play under control and can get penalties for unnecessary roughness. Yeah. I mean, on the night that he was drafted, he talked about how he now at this next level, now that it's for money, he's going to watch himself approach the line of what he can get away with, but also, make sure that he doesn't cross it.
But the one thing with that, Aldo, is I don't want to take away the kid's aggressiveness, right? That's the one thing I'm always worried about is the kid plays with a motor, and the kid plays with aggression, and you see it on tape. Even after plays, he's always there pumping up his teammates. He's getting into the opponent's face, and yeah, you don't want the penalties because the penalty will get you on the bench real quick, right? So that's where he's gonna have to control it. And again, this is a Grady Jarrett. That's where I think this veteran presence it's going to be there. It's really going to help kids like Turner and even a Gervon Dexter, for example. Maybe with having that veteran presence there to kind of harness some of their athletic ability and maybe even help coach them on the field or on the sidelines as the game is happening as well.
Very cool. All right, let us move on to a total surprise. I think everybody outside of Hallis Hall and maybe some people in were surprised when the name Ruben Hyppolite was announced as the Bears' 4th-round pick, number 132. Talk to me about Ruben Hyppolite. By the way, J2K says it looks like you're the only one on planet Earth that has all 22 on Hyppolite. So congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, J2K, because I'd heard about Hyppolite. I'd never seen him. I'd never really paid attention to him in terms of watching Maryland and focusing on him. It's more his teammate that you'd focus on. But I'd heard about him, especially when I was watching Trader, the safety, scouting him as well. But the one thing about Hyppolite is 4.39 speed he ran at 240 pounds. Some say he was 236 at the pro day, but he wasn't invited to the combine. And the more you dig into this kid, it's more interesting stuff in him that you find about him. A 4-star recruit coming out of high school. He picked Maryland over schools like Penn State, Michigan, LSU, Auburn, West Virginia. So some Power 5 schools were coming after this guy because of the athletic ability he had. 4-year starter, a team captain in 2023. This is a guy that makes the defensive calls. You can see the captain in him, if you will, being able to line guys up and going after the quarterback. Now again, his name to fame or his game is all based upon speed, right? And what do we hear about the Bears wanting in terms of linebacker? They want to add some of that some linebacker speed there. And the one thing with him is he shows good in terms of instincts, ability to kind of sniff out key certain plays and get that a little bit of a step there. You see him. I posted specifically his 2023 tape versus Michigan. Obviously, that team that won the national championship, and you see him be able to beat blockers to their spots because of that quickness, because of the speed, because of his instincts, be able to read and key real quick. And with that speed, with that athletic ability, he gets there underneath the blockers pad level and gets into the backfield and makes a play in the backfield with dropping either getting in a hole and dropping the running back for a minimal gain, or getting into the backfield and dropping him for a loss on the play as well. So in terms of a blitzer, he's pretty good in terms of, again, 4.39 speed, delayed blitz. You see him coming through and fighting. Another one that plays hard. I mentioned team captain already, so you get that out of him. But looking at the Bears and looking at his measurables at 5'11", 240 with short arms, there are times you see him, if he doesn't get off of blocks, if he doesn't slip a block, those guys can get their hands on him and they pretty much plow him all the way. So, there's going to be areas with coaching stuff that they're going to have to kind of build him up and maybe get him stronger and coach him up. But I see his first couple of seasons, making himself a name on special teams, using that 4.39 speed and being a factor there. And then eventually, possibly getting opportunities as he gets more and more accustomed to the NFL game, gets bigger and stronger. And then I can see him getting some opportunities, maybe on defense. But, I think he's going to initially challenge for a roster spot of a player. And we'll get to that later on. But I think his first maybe year or two, you should see him making plays on special teams.
I agree. He is going to be a starter on special teams. That is almost without a doubt. But we have to ask the question. And I know a lot of Ryan Poles lovers are going to say, you guys need to stop this. But I'm going to do it anyway. We're going to look at who was drafted after him and then ask the question, would you have rather? So here is Hyppolite up here at 132, linebacker out of Maryland. The Chiefs, stop me when you say, I would have rather had this guy.
Can I stop you right there for a second?
Sure.
Let's go back to where they were originally. They're at 109.
Oh,
originally.
That's right. Great point, brother.
So they traded that pick to Buffalo. Buffalo jumped up and got Deion Walker in the 4th round. So at 109, if they had stayed there, and this is what I was talking about, kind of going through the draft, and like, all right, okay, who could have gone here that they made them want to trade out, right? Now, obviously, I believe this is, if I'm not mistaken, and guys, correct me if I'm wrong, is this the pick that they traded, that they got the 4th round pick next year, or is that with the Rams trade? I think that was the Rams trade.
It says there from Chicago via Buffalo and Chicago.
Okay, so I don't think this was that trade. All right, so basically, okay, why did the Bears trade out? Is when I look at this order. At first, the first pick 103 was DK, the receiver we all like, but they already took a receiver, so I don't think I'm gonna take a receiver. Now we take about Bashal Toon, running back out of Virginia Tech, goes to the Jaguars there. Cam Scatterable goes to the Giants there. So back-to-back running backs. Craig Woodson, the safety from California. So I don't think it was Kaiser, the linebacker from Northern. I don't think it was Dante Darnold Jr., even though I liked him. He's a speed guy. I don't think it was a receiver. So could it have been the running backs, right? Could it have been, or maybe, the safety Craig Woodson. But if it's a safety Craig Woodson, there are other safeties that are higher rated than Woodson. So that's something could have been here, another area where they targeted one of those two running backs, and because they were gone, he decided to trade down. So now, if you want to go from there, after that pick 109, look at all these names, right?
Yeah.
We got
Ty Robinson out of Nebraska, good defensive tackle. Right. Stutzman, the speedy linebacker, relatively speaking.
Billy Bowman Jr., the safety that I love, that a lot of people love from Oklahoma. Barrett Carter, the linebacker, speed linebacker, you like a lot, Aldo. Lathan Ransom, another safety that I like. So safety, may or may not have been high on their board there. Jack Sawyer, you might not have fit in terms of traits there for them. So all these guys, Dylan Sampson, another running back candidate, gone. Let me try to take a look here. Who else could have been some? I think it stops right there. Basically, Quincy Riley was a long corner that I liked a lot coming out of Louisville. He really had a great Senior Bowl week. But then they at 132 is when they make the Ruben Hyppolite pick. And now we can, if you want to go pick up where you're I think heading before in terms of after the pick.
And I'll add Teddy Buchanan, probably one of the fastest, definitely one of the fastest linebackers at the combine. And I looked at him because of the Bears' public desire to get faster at the linebacker position. Oops. What did I do? Why did I do that? There it is. All right. So after the Hyppolite, Jalen Royals, wide receiver, Q Robinson, linebacker, Tonka Hemingway. You talked a lot about him, Danny. And you also talked about Alik Ayomanor, the wide receiver out of Stanford. You talked about Joshua Farmer and Jordan Watkins and Tyree and Ingram Dawkins. All these guys you did in detail. Carson Vincent from Alabama A&M, Riley Mills, with a lot of us know from Notre Dame, Jordan Phillips, Shadur Sanders, Mac McMillian, and Brady Swinson, who's probably the guy that I would have gone for here. But any of these names, Jaden Blue, any of these names, DJ Giddens.
Right. So that's the thing. It's all these running backs were still available, right? Or there's DJ Giddens or some of the other guys we're talking about, but they just didn't like these guys apparently more than me. Like the guys that for me in terms of past 132, obviously Royals a very talented kid out of Utah State. I think he went to the Chiefs, and I think he's gonna do a great job there. Ayomanor, the receiver from Stanford, big, tall receiver, ran a pretty good 40. But again, you've drafted Luther Burns, so I've kind of eliminated receiver at that point in the draft.
Yeah, I agree.
and for Jordan Watkins as well. I liked him a lot, but I think that's that was another receiver. Obviously, Joshua Farmer. It was a highly recruited defensive tackle out of Florida State. Fit the profile, 300+ pounds, almost 35-inch arm length. But the production wasn't there. So and that's a defensive tackle that they let go there. So if I had to say like maybe Joshua Farmer could have been a pick here. If you go into top of the 5th round, obviously, because this is the 4th round. If you go top of the 5th round, a ton of players on. Tyron Ingram Dawkins, the guy that I projected as a defensive end from Georgia, could kick inside to be defensive tackle. That could have been a guy you could look at there as well. So Jordan Phillips, a big defensive tackle from Maryland. Mac Williams, a corner from UCF. If you wanted to go to corner, you talk about Braden Swinson, who I saw more of a 3-4 outside linebacker, and he went to the Patriots, so he's gonna play that position there as well. So there are players, man, that you could draft there. So that tells me that again, someone, and I'm going to assume that it was Richard Smith, the linebacker coach, that really pounded the table for Ruben Hyppolite, and I think that's where the coaching staff again won out there. And then polls and companies said, all right, he's a fast, athletic linebacker. Richard Smith said he can do something with him, help him in terms of get better shedding and avoiding bigger blockers. We'll see what happens, but I think that's, of all the picks, although that was the one that really kind of like, whoa, really, like. Okay, like I heard about him, but I haven't really done a deep dive into him, and it was just kind of like one of those shocking picks there.
Indeed. All right, well, moving on to the 5th round. Excuse the typo on the screen there. It's not Zack Frazier. It's Zay Frazier. Z-A-H. Tell me what you know about this very thin-looking, very tall cornerback.
Yeah, I have my notes here going on. Let me see if I misplaced them. Oh, they're here. So yeah, that's the thing. You put on a tape, skinny, tall corner, right? So this is a kid that started off his career at Southern Illinois, played only 4 games in 2019, then ended up transferring to Coffeyville Community College. I love Coffee. I think I would have done well at that school, Coffeyville Community College. Then goes to Texas San Antonio for the last 3 seasons and just a 1-year starter. So he's got inexperience there. Only started 10 games in his career there, but his traits, 6'3", 186 with 32, almost 33-inch arm length. So he's got that big size there. 4.36 40-yard dash with a 1.51 10-yard split, 36.5-inch vertical. So this kid's an athlete. This kid's a big, tall, skinny, a cornerback that can stay in phase with that recovery speed. And again, one year starter, but he did do something real good. Tied for 2nd in FBS with school record 6 interceptions. Okay. Also led the team with 9 pass breakups. So he's got ball. He's got ability to make plays on the ball. So, ball hawking skills, if you will. So I think that's what they're looking at. But definitely for me, this is a guy with traits. They like his speed and length combination. They like what he did last year in his only year as a starter with showing some of that ball skill. And I think this is a guy that, as a matter of fact, I think Ryan Poles had mentioned this in that press conference. Well, Al Harris, their new defensive back coach, called him. And I don't know if Al Harris, where he was at, he saw him. He said, hey, we got to look at this kid, Zack Frazier. So Al Harris, actually the coach, once again, the coach going to bat for one of these players, saying we got to look at this kid, Al Harris. And that's where it leads me to another, I believe, again, this was another coaching decision in terms of the staff saying, hey, we want this kid, just like Richard Smith with the linebacker. And then we talked about earlier on in terms of, Ben Johnson with Colston Loveland, and then Antwan Raymond with Luther Burden.
Well, I hope, that this formula is working where if you're indeed correct, that the coaches, and correct me if I'm wrong, the coaches are having a big influence on these draft picks. And that's always been the case. I understand that. But if this is a little bit different than in the past, that they, it's an extra ounce or two, I hope it works, because Bowles is out of chances in my book. If these draft picks are flat this year and we have a losing record this year, I'm going to be pissed off. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, but you're right, and that's the thing. So that's why, to me, if these picks don't work out, don't pan out, whatever you want to say, I think it's, as opposed to previous years where I was a harsh critic of Ryan Poles.
Yes,
this is going to be the Ben Johnson and his staff influence. Mm-hmm. So this is where you turn to Ben Johnson and say, all right, big buddy, you got the $13 million a year. You came in with this, with this, wielding this big power here, and you and your staff, you wanted these guys. Why isn't it working? And this is where I take pressure away from Poles and put it squarely on the spotlight, that is on Ben Johnson and his coaching staff with this draft class.
Interesting. All right, let's move on now to Luke Newman. And if you don't know the story, Greg Gabriel was doing some work for a scout, and Luke Newman was one of the guys he looked at tape, and Greg went nuts over this guy, the way he played and so forth. And then when his measurements came out, he wasn't as excited. But prior to that, he did call Ryan Poles and said, keep an eye out for him. And Poles responded, yeah, we haven't done much work on him, but we will. And then prior to the pick in the 5th round, 195, Poles texted Greg and said, thank you for the tip or something like that. And so Greg Gabriel may have had a big influence on Luke Newman being a part of this team. So I turn it over to you, Danny. Is that a good thing that Luke Newman is on the Bears or not?
We'll find out. We'll give Greg his props if he hits, and if he's not, then we'll blame Greg for it. But
exactly.
But this is the one guy. Actually, I'm unable to actually get tape on this guy. So I'm looking for Michigan State tape. I keep getting 2023. Obviously, he wasn't there in 2023. He was a left tackle at Holy Cross. So this is the one that I'm working on trying to get tape on Luke Newman. But obviously, you can pull up on YouTube and see what they did last year. But for me, I like to see all 22s. I like to see the end zone copy, so on and so forth. But you look at him is obviously he's a left tackle at Holy Cross, so he's got the athletic ability. Kicks inside the left guard. I believe he also played right guard as well last year at Michigan State. So he's got that. He's got the athletic traits. Short arms. I think 31 sub 32-inch arms. So that right away for me marks him as a center. So I think that's where they're going to go and maybe kick him. He was at the East West Shrine game, and I think he was taking snaps there at the center, if I remember correctly as well. So I think this is where his opportunity to come in here and make this roster is go ahead and say, all right, battle. For example, we talked about some spots there on the offensive line. Battle a guy maybe like a Bill Murray for a position to back up at guard and at center. So I think this is, or maybe Doug Kramer could his position could be something where if Luke Newman comes in and shows he can play center, Doug Kramer can become expendable because Newman can potentially play 2 positions just like Kramer as well. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, this is a guy that I'm looking forward to getting some hands on some all 22s so I can break him down. And when I do, I'm going to post it on Shimon Draft Scout. But yeah, athletic ability. And then I caught a bit of Greg on Saturday, said that he's got a mean streak. This guy plays with a nasty temperament. So obviously offensive linemen and temperament, if they're nasty and they're offensive linemen, I usually tend to love them. So we'll take a look. And once I got my hands on tape, I'm going to post a report on Luke Newman.
It sounds wonderful. All right, let's get back to the Bears pick in the 7th round. They went almost 40 some picks without a pick after Luke Newman. And then when it came to 233, Kyle Monangai from Rutgers, the running back, was the selection. I remember you talking about this guy briefly with such a great running back class. I don't think you spent a lot of time on him, but this guy is definitely worthy of study because he's, I wouldn't say a unique back, but he is an effective power back for a man his size.
Yeah, so you put on Rutgers tape, and I was actually he first caught my eye. I was watching Dante Trader Jr. Maryland playing against Rutgers, and then this back was running through the Maryland defense, and I'm like, who is this guy? Monangai. Look him up. 5'8", 209 pounds. Very productive back in the Big Ten. Had the 1,200 yards his junior campaign, 1,262 with 8 touchdowns. Last year, over 1,279 with 13 touchdowns. So he's got 21 touchdowns in the last 2 seasons alone. So a 3-year starter, a 2-time All Big Ten, led the Big Ten Conference in rushing in 2023, a 2-time team captain. So how many times have I said the word team captain? Trapilo was a team captain. Hyppolite was a team captain. And this kid here is a team captain. So obviously, bringing in some of these guys with a high football character. And you put on his tape, and he is what it looks like there. He's an in-between the tackle, downhill thumper. He's a guy that, could struggle, bouncing runs to the outside, just may not have that foot speed, that quickness to take the edge. But of course, here you put on a highlight here where he's running away from the entire defense there. But yeah, I mean, he's again, talk about that inside zone, outside zone, power gap scheme. This guy can run all those. He fits all those schemes there, right? So he's a guy that has patience. Runs his shoulder square to the line of scrimmage, allows his blockers to go ahead and set up and block. And the one thing when you're scouting running backs, first thing you want to take a look and see, how patient are they? Are they always up the tail of their blockers and really kind of getting themselves in trouble, or are they patient enough where they let the blockers get upset, and now you use your vision to go ahead and cut off of your blocks in front of you, and then and that's what Monangai does. He's a guy that again kind of drags it out, runs against shoulder square to the line of scrimmage, sees an opening, and then it gets in there. So again, his burst speed is not going to be his calling card. But there's on the game film I posted, and he ran a huge run against Maryland there as well. Gets in the open field, gets caught at the 1 yard line. But again, he's a guy that will make his money in between the tackles. So 4.6 40 time at the combine, not great, but what he does is he'll get those short yardage situation carries. He's a guy that's going to come in and it's just perfect in terms of the way he runs. A lot of guys are kind of comparing him to Isaiah Pacheco, who also came from Rutgers, also runs really hard. I think Pacheco's a little bit more quicker and shiftier than Monangai, but Monangai is probably more powerful. He does a great job of lowering his pad level and running behind his pads and finishing runs. So you're going to love that. So that's why I say anything like short yard situation, I think he comes in there, and I think he could potentially be someone. I mentioned in my summary or my scouting report, I think he can come in and challenge Roshan Johnson for those short yard carries and short goal line carries, so on and so forth. So we'll see how that battle goes there as well.
By the way, I apologize for people tuning in, hoping to see an interview with Kyle's college running back mate. And now I'm forgetting his name, Antwan Raymond. Antwan Raymond was going to join us, but something happened at the last minute with the communications department at Rutgers, and so we'll try to reschedule later on down the line. But Kyle, very effective, as Danny said, at Rutgers, and I have actually a little bit of video here that I think people will get a kick out of. This was a portion of the recruiting tape that Rutgers put on YouTube when it came to Kyle.
An honor roll student with a 3.9 GPA, focusing on studying economics in college, Monangai hopes to crunch both numbers and tacklers at the next level.
So he got a lot of offers from Ivies and all that stuff.
Yeah, all the Ivies. He always reminds us about Harvard.
But he wanted a program that had a serious football program and academics. So Rutgers offered him the best of both worlds.
It means a lot, representing your home state. I'm big on representing where I'm from. I'm big on doing great things where your roots are. And playing for Rutgers gives me that opportunity.
Here's Monangai in the carry again, running left, and he is in for the Rutgers touchdown.
Love it. Super smart guy, and a super competitor. Like you said, he's captain. Couldn't think more than about this guy. He's going to fit in really well in this clubhouse.
Right. And again, highly productive, back-to-back 1,200-yard seasons, led the Big Ten in rushing in 2023. So it's not like a guy just kind of like, 800, 600, 700. He's a guy that's, 21 touchdowns the last 2 seasons. So you put on his tape and you're a little bit more excited. Now, the 4.6 could be a little fishy there. I don't think he's a 4.6 guy. You watch him run, I think he's more than a mid 4.5. So, those times could be off, whatever. But, just the competitive juices, the perfect fit in terms of the ability to, again, stay square, pick that lane, wait for the blocking set up, good patience, solid vision, and be able to kind of burst and get through it. So my only thing was, obviously, I think, cutting it to the outside, I think that's not going to be his game, right? I think he doesn't have the speed, the burst to take the edge around the corner. At the NFL level, but that's why you have a DeAndre Swift, right? So that's a different type of back. So I think it's a nice compliment. Why have to wait till the 7th round to go ahead and pick a running back? Is it something? It's a fair question that we can all ask. But I think they got a guy that has a chance to come in here and a make the team, and B, also you could see him play on Sundays.
Indeed. Got a question here from J2K. Have you done any work on UDFA running back Deion Hankins from Texas State?
Not yet, J2K. I've been trying to get my hands on some tape for him as well. I've earmarked a couple of the other undrafted free agents that I've already got some tape on that I'm going to break down as well and post something on Shimon Draft Scout. Has J2K gotten tape of the kid from Texas State?
Yeah, let us know, J2K. We'll take care of you. Take you out into the back room. Take care of you.
Bring your tape.
Indeed. All right, so those are our picks. Let's talk a little bit about the press conference. I played a clip earlier about Post talking about how he was married to the board, so to speak. And I truly believe that when a team, at a certain point, a team should start deviating from the board in some cases. Whether that time has come for the Bears or has passed for the Bears, I can't say without giving up more thought, but I was a little disappointed with his answer about how strict he is to the board. Now, I went and looked at the press conferences from every one of the NFC North teams, and they all said the same thing: the board. We listen to the board and so forth. So apparently there's some relationship going on here with the board that I can't account for. You have any thoughts about whether polls should maybe not pay so close attention to the board?
Well, in scouting and also in drafting, it's always, you'll hear probably every GM talk about the board, this how it's set up, and so on and so forth. And I think that's paramount because every team's going to have a different board, primarily because it's a different staff, it's a different type of that type of a scheme they run, and they're all looking for different things, right? So a defensive lineman for the Steelers is going to be different than the defensive lineman that Dennis Allen's going to want here. So every team sits there and sets their board up. So I think that's why you hear every GM say we stuck to our board and then even though they picked a player that we thought was lower in our board and so on and so forth. So it's important, it's paramount that you sit at board, you're confident in your rankings as a personnel department, as a scout, as a coaching staff, and that now you got to go through the draft. That's why when we were talking earlier about the running back and maybe Johnson being a little miffed about not taking a running back early on. This is them, all of them, setting that board. So if he's going to stick to the board and Paul sticks to the board as well, it's their board, right? So, and in terms of deviating from the board, that's typically where you have problems. That's typically where you get certain busts, right? If you say, all right, this player A is my highest rated player right now, but he's for example, he's a safety, but you need a linebacker, and you need a linebacker really bad. Well, you could potentially be giving bypassing a safety that could be a Pro Bowl safety for a linebacker that's only going to be on special teams. So we won't know how that all plays out until everything comes to fruition. But we'll never see their board, obviously, and no one's ever going to tell us the truth in terms of, this player so-and-so was higher on our board, but we picked, this linebacker because our coach wanted this linebacker, and we said, all right, we'll get him for you. But, they're never going to come out and admit it. But that's typically where the mistakes happen. That's typically where you get busts. So hopefully they stick to your board. You set a good board, collectively, and you stick to it, and you just flip it. That's why, when everybody's saying, "Oh, we need an offensive tackle." Yes, they need a left tackle. But for me, if they went, for example, I've been, evident. I think Aldo, you agree with me. Kelvin Banks Jr. was not, for me at least, a top 10 player. So at number 10, if he's sitting there, and so is Colston Loveland, so is Michael Williams, so is Tyler Warren, and they pick Jalen Walker, and they pick Kelvin Banks. To me, that's a reach, right? To me, it's a reach to fill a need. Now they'll say it's their board. That's how he was the highest rated player on the board, and maybe they're telling the truth, but we don't know that. But see, that to me is a reach, filling a need, as opposed to going for getting the Michael Williams or getting the Colston Loveland or getting a Tyler Warren, a higher rated player. That's where you can fall into some trouble, where you reach for a need instead of getting the higher rated player.
Good stuff, Danny. All right, let us talk about a moment in the press conference. Danny, you wanted me to pull this tape because you wanted to comment on it. This is Ben Johnson being asked, get all these weapons. What are you going to do?
Listen, we talked about it. The moment the players got back in the building, call it 3 weeks ago now, it was going to be a competitive environment. There is no depth chart right now. If you want to play, you got to go earn it. If you want a role, you got to go earn it. They know that. So we were very straightforward and honest with them when they came into the building. I think all we did this weekend was we might have just turned up the notch, just a couple of dials for certain people in the building. So that's a good thing. That's a healthy thing. That's where you bring out the best, not only in your team, but in each individual. So what I'm going to be curious to see is what guys look like when the ball's not in their hands on offense. Okay. Yeah, you're right. We have a lot of weapons. And so how are you going to run your route when you might not be number one in the progression? Okay. How are you going to block for your teammate when he has the ball? Because if you do those things right, then as a coaching staff, we're going to want to get you the ball a little bit more. So it all ties together. It all goes hand in hand. And that's the beauty behind it.
Boy, that guy's impressive.
Yeah. And this is like, now, remember the last couple of years, I'm like, I don't even want to watch Eberflus talk, to be honest with you. Now it's like I'm like this, I'm glued, like I'm gonna hear something like, and he always gives you something, right? You always gotta listen, but he gives you something. And there's a ton of stuff in there. First of all, like all the coaches say, oh, there's no depth chart. There's a depth chart right now. Okay. In his mind, there's a depth chart. It might not be officially on a website or whatnot. Caleb Williams is the number one starting quarterback. Darnell Wright's a starting right tackle, right? Joe Tooney is starting left guard. Like, so there's a depth chart in his mind, but there isn't one on the actual website or whatnot. So that's the first thing there. The one thing I love what he said there was they put the pressure on everybody. So he goes, they turn up the notch. I forgot how the quote he said it exactly, but they turn up a notch on some players in the building. Who are you trying to turn a notch up on? To me, I'm sending a message. All right. Yeah. Then I go through this draft. Colston Loveland was a 10th overall pick. All right. That's a high pick. Is it pressure on Cole Kmet? All right. So remember, this is a staff that's coming in with a blank slate. They might come in and say, and Ryan Poles says, oh, well, Cole Kmet's our starting tight end. He's a guy. And again, I like Cole Kmet. So just let me preface by saying that I'm a guy that's been advocating here for him. But but Ben John says, you know what? I'm not sure I like this guy. So is there a pressure on Cole Kmet to make this roster? The other thing is we talked about Luther Burden. And I think either it was you or John Tooch said it on Draft Now when he drafted Burden. Is the pressure now on DJ Moore? Is DJ Moore a guy that I know, Aldo, you've been on him for last year. I know you were disappointed in his production last year in terms of, I think mainly in terms of the way some body language stuff and the way he kind of lacked blocking down the field. Is DJ Moore in trouble here? Or is Johnson putting the doubts in DJ Moore's head saying, hey, no block, no rock, or shape up or ship out, or whatever, So that's another guy I look at. Obviously, I think Ozzy Trapilo it's put a pressure on Braxton Jones to get back and play tackle. Shemar Turner, I think, puts pressure on Zach Pickens, a third-round pick from a couple of seasons ago that really has been disappointing. So I think, that's another Ryan Poles selection. And then, there's pressure on him there as well. Maybe Gervon Dexter, there's pressure on him now with Shemar Turner. Every one of these picks, I think, the kid, the Hyppolite, the linebacker, Sewell, the linebacker from, the backup linebacker, maybe there's pressure on him now, and so on and so forth. As you go down this list here, Monangai, the running back, Roshan Johnson, they might not like Roshan Johnson. So I think Monangai has a chance to take snaps, even maybe a roster spot from Roshan Johnson. So that really caught my eye. And I think he's setting this up to be, a very, very competitive, a very high intensity training camp. And I think, if you're a fan that you like going and watching, training camp, during the summer times, this might be a training camp you might want to go see, because I think everyone's going to be feeling that pressure. No one's going to know exactly where they are. Obviously, if I'm Cole Kmet, I'm a little bit nervous, right? Top 10 pick comes in my position. We'll see what happens here. But I think even if there is no real danger of Cole Kmet, for example, losing his roster spot, I think just again that comment ratcheting up the notch a little bit would put some doubts in terms of Cole Kmet. Like, wait, I got to come in training camp, the best shape of my life. I got to block my ass off in the run drill stuff. I got to be able to catch, everything thrown my way. I got to make sure I pay attention to in the classroom and learn this offense as best I can. That's what I love hearing, because now I think you're going to get the best of a lot of players that maybe before, under the previous regime, was kind of cruising through training camp, cruising through the preseason games. This, I think, kind of lights a fire under everybody.
Yeah, one of the things that Ben has talked about is that it's not going to be easy. I think it was I forgot the guy's name, the designer guy who works over at ESPN, does good work. He asked the question to Ben Johnson, what are you going to do to make things easier for the players to learn the system? He says it's not going to be easy. Why should we expect it to be easy? It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. And that's a fantastic answer. Let's play in reality here. Let's not sacrifice effectiveness to make it simple for players. That's not coaching. That's babysitting.
Placating. You're placating.
Yeah, placating. So I asked in the chat, I'll ask you, do you think there could be a 25% more or less roster turnover going into opening day, week 1, Chicago Bears?
Sure. It's a new staff. Nothing is guaranteed, at least in my opinion. I think everyone goes in there, and this staff comes in there with a blank slate on everybody. I talked about earlier, Kyle Monangai was a 3rd-round pick last year or 2 years ago, last draft. I think his position could be up for grabs there, especially if Braxton Jones proves to be healthy and he can either compete for the starting left tackle or be a swing tackle. I think so that no one is guaranteed other than Caleb Williams, other than Roman Dunze. And I think a couple of players you can pick and choose there, but I think no one is really guaranteed a spot. So are we gonna have some surprise cuts? Sure. Are we gonna have some guys get traded probably in training camp that we didn't expect to get traded? I think we can expect anything to happen here. So if anything, even if they keep the roster from pretty much the way it is, just him saying that, putting that out in the ether for players to hear it, I think that's going to bring the group together. And when they come to training camp, ready to roll. Because remember, last couple of training camps, they haven't really had it that hard under Matt Eberflus. So the one thing I'm going to be critical if he doesn't play his starters in the preseason. That drives me insane when these coaches don't play their starters at all in the preseason. I'm not saying playing them, playing 3 quarters. I'm just saying at least a quarter a game or something like that. They don't play these starters in the preseason, and then week 1 they're all flat, and you wonder why why they're flat. So I'm curious to see how that is going to happen in terms of the preseason and how does he handle the snaps for the starters and the backups and so on and so forth as well. So this is going to be very, very curious to watch. And again, I love listening to him talk because he always gives you something, always gives you a little bit of a tidbit that gets you thinking about, what does he mean by that? What's he saying by that? Like, who's that about? Or is there something about that? Or is it just, he's just putting it out there for just no reason? So it's the stuff that, as a fan and as an analyst, before you kind of tuned out Eberflus, right? Because he's always the same mundane crap every week, week in and week out. Now it's like, all right, let me listen, because I might get something here that, I didn't think it was coming.
Indeed. Rough Love. Let's get to some of these questions now. Rough Love. Hi, guys. Pose is getting trashed. Other GMs schooled him all weekend. He might be done in 2026. I know that's hyperbole there. He didn't get trashed, but there were definitely a lot of eyebrow-raising, questionable decisions done by Pose. Based on the strategy of what you perceived, give him a grade. I'm not asking for a grade on the players, but I'm asking for a grade on should he have picked that guy or that guy. And when you put all that together, does he get an A, a B, a C, a D, or did he fail miserably? Because I think that's the best way to do grading right now is what decisions did he make that perhaps you would have done differently as a teacher?
It's a good question. I didn't think of it in that perspective, but the one thing, like we went through the picks right now, and there was really no one I really like, oh my God, like what's he doing here? Other than the linebacker, obviously I think 4th round. I had a more like it's around 6-7 kind of player, and he went 4th round for him. And that was the one eyebrow raiser for me, really. Zack Frazier was a guy you hear about a lot in terms of the pre-draft camp, in terms of sleeper. A lot of people like them. So I think. Like obviously not going for a running back until 7th round was a little bit another eye raiser for me. Like, but maybe they only like a handful of guys, and that's a little surprising because it was a deep running back class.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so those are the 2 things for me. I would say obviously this is changed once we see the players play and they produce, but I'd say more of like a B-, B minus in terms of. Now the one good thing is he did get the 4th round pick that he traded for Joe Thuney. For next year's draft, he traded to the Chiefs for Joe Thuney. He got that back. So that's a positive. So now their draft for next year is full. So they have a pick in each round. So I think that's a positive there. But I guess if I had to knock them is not getting a running back earlier than the seventh round. And again, I'm being pickier. And Hyppolite in the fourth round, where I had thought he might have been available there in the fifth, sixth round. But again, we have to go back and talk about how convincing was Richard Smith, the linebackers coach. How influential were they in that room, saying, we need this guy now. He's going to fit the scheme perfectly. We have an idea how we're going to use him, blah, 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 all that stuff. So, not knowing all that information, I'd say a B minus.
I heard some criticism on the radio today about acquiring that fourth pick from next year. I think it may have been Hogan John's podcast, and the importance that he placed on getting that fourth round pick from next year. Is that really a good decision? Shouldn't you have used the resources to, pick higher by not trading, acquiring that pick? In other words, using your resources this year so that you can truly jumpstart the trenches as opposed to acquiring a pick for next year. I kind of buy into that.
Now, the one thing about that is obviously, a lot of teams were looking to acquire picks for next year. I think again, it's early, but the early talk right now. I already got my list for 120 top prospects for next year's class, but it's looking to be like a lot deeper class next year. And there's already 3 or 4, possibly 5, offensive linemen that go in the first round. Again, it's early, but running backs looks like it should be a pretty solid group there as well. So I like getting the pick for next year because I do want to see more picks, and especially if it's going to be a deeper class. Remember, the strength of this class was always mid first round to the end of day 2. And I think once you got into that area, I think now you're looking for traits. You're looking for guys that might have fallen through the cracks. And I think they picked that guy, a linebacker with traits in terms of speed. They picked the corner with size and length, and very, very raw, but also had some ball skills there as well. I think they went that again. The running back that late surprises me really. And then if anything, I'd have to criticize, but no, I'm not going to criticize them for getting a pick in the fourth round. For next year, I think could you have gone up and gotten a player? Possibly, but all the players that I had rated high on my board, they already passed up. So it's hard for me to criticize them because obviously they didn't like the players that I liked.
Mm-hmm. It's a good question about did Poles get value with these picks, and I definitely think that Luther Burden was great value. I mean, this guy was going to be a first round draft pick.
Yeah, Burden at 39 was. I mean, I saw mocks where he was going, bottom, half of the first round. Obviously, some of the questions in terms of why his production dip and all the other stuff that Steve Smith had brought up. Those things that I'm sure that they've talked about and they've kind of worked with him in terms of he had some answers for that they felt comfortable with. But just an element that they've been missing on this offense was a guy with that type of make you miss ability from the slot. A guy that runs deep and runs at 4.41 speeds. I think that's a natural hands catcher as well. Great body control to be able to contour his body and adjust for the ball. So I have a really good feeling about their first, let's say 3 or 4 picks here in terms of all 3 are second round picks and all, even though obviously Colston Loveland. I think all 4 of those guys you're going to see them dressed and available, assuming health, and playing major snaps next season.
Outstanding. All right, getting back to some more questions. Let's do that instead. Let's see. Do you think DR will develop better than Simo? I hope so. Our new offensive line coach, what's his name? Dan Rocher. Do you think he's going to do a better job developing the offensive lineman than Chris Morgan? What do you know about Rocher, and can you provide a comparison?
The only thing I know about Rocher is he's very, very popular in the league, right? He was a guy that was with the Saints for a long time with Sean Payton and on that crew, and Owen Kreutz, who played for him, I believe, for a season when he was with New Orleans, spoke high of him. And I think he's a guy that's a veteran. It's been there for a long time. Obviously, went to the college game, so he's got experience in terms of managing, or coaching young guys and veterans. And if you look at the Saints offensive line during his time there, I mean, he had Pro Bowlers, whether it's Andres Pete and eventually later on was Ramczyk and some of the Jabari Evans and some of the other guys they had there, at this time at New Orleans. So he developed some Pro Bowl, quality in terms of what he did in New Orleans, and that's all I can really go off of. And from there we'll see. In terms of Simo, he's a guy that for whatever reason was highly thought of, but highly thought of, in my opinion, here with the Bears. No one really talked about Simo outside the organization, unless, although you had heard something differently, or maybe someone in the chat can give me some. He was
Greg
more
liked him a lot, but that I don't know where that comes from.
Who liked him a lot?
Greg Gabriel.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure where he came from in terms of his previous. I can probably look it up, but like I never heard of him prior to being hired here by Chicago. And again, the first time I really knew who he was is when Poles was bragging about the workout he put Darnell Wright in before they drafted Darnell Wright. So, but Roshar I had heard of before, and obviously much of that is from what he did in New Orleans.
What I like about it, I can't, just like Danny, can't really difficult to compare, but the fact that Ben Johnson picked the offensive line coach, that's bonus points right there. I can hear the bonus points sound effect, bing, 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 because I don't believe that the offensive coordinator head coach picked Simo because he wasn't in the previous administration.
He was under he was under what's his name, Nagy.
Yeah. So it to me, what's going on here? So this is the first time in a long time that we've gotten closer to having that synchronicity the way I've always described it should be. President of the team hires the GM hires the coach hires the assistant coaches and coordinators, and blah, blah, blah. We aren't totally there yet because this is Poe's second attempt at a head coach, but at least now, with just 1 year of the rookie quarterback, now in the second year, now you got a head coach, an offensive coordinator. Everything is aligned for success. This is the closest that we've come to doing it the right way. So that's important to me.
The biggest question is, was Simo a Trace Armstrong client? That's
I think that would be a good bet. I'll tell you that. All right, back to our questions. Are we keeping defensive tackle Williams or Pickens? Those guys are fighting for a job, like Danny was saying, right, Danny?
Yeah, I think Zach Pickens is in trouble. If I had to pick between those two, obviously, I think Chris Williams was just signed to a contract, if I'm not mistaken, a restricted free agent contract that they signed him. And I think they like him. I think he fits this scheme in terms of that 3 technique. Pickens was really guy I like coming out of South Carolina. Actually, I liked him better than Gervon Dexter. If you remember at that draft, I think he was a guy that fit perfectly in terms of that 3 technique, get upfield. But he's been a disappointment. And for me, it was an eye opener was last year when he was a healthy inactive. And I'm like, all right, well, whatever. It's a new staff, so he's another guy that's got to come in here and battle his ass off and prove to this new staff that he can, he's worthy of keeping. But if I had to pick between those two guys, Chris Williams or Zach Pickens, I think Pickens is in trouble with the addition of Shemar Turner, and also obviously bringing in Grady Jarrett, via free agency.
It's going to be a great camp battles. I can't wait for that to happen. Brandon is back with another question. Do you see some of Ray Rice in our new running back, Kyle Monangai? It's a great question.
He's not as shifty and as quick as Ray Rice,
okay.
Brandon. He's a bigger, a tad bigger. I think Ray Rice is also about 5'8", 200 plus pounds. So they're probably about the same size. But for me, like Monangai is more power. And Ray Rice, while he was strong, I think he was a shiftier, more quicker back coming out of. I believe he came out of. It wasn't Rutgers. Where did he come out of? Ray Rice.
I don't remember.
Yeah, but I think Rice more a quicker, shiftier type of back.
Slick is asking about Jedrick Willis, who is out there on the street, or Willis.
Yeah. Go ahead, Aldo.
No, I was just going to ask your thoughts.
Yeah, so I've been kind of looking at the free agents out there, and I know Jedrick Willis came up as a left tackle. He was a high pick by the Browns, but a guy who really has been a bust so far in terms of a tackle. But he's a guy that battled a lot of injuries. So do you want to take a shot on that? I don't know. There's another guy, George Faint, who's been like a swing tackle for a bunch of other teams. It's slim pickings as you would expect, right? So, do you just give the kids, Karan Magaji and Trapilo and see what we get from Braxton Jones and just kind of run with those guys? Or I think they could still bring in a veteran just to kind of another camp body, if you will, to kind of compete and just take some snaps. So we'll see where it goes. But yeah, Willis is a guy, high pick, really been a disappointment with the Browns, and it's been hurt a lot throughout his career.
Squeegee is wondering if Tyreek Stevenson's job is in danger.
Not see. So Za is a talented kid, but he's raw, in my opinion. I think he's a developmental kind of prospect. So he's a guy you can probably put on the roster and just kind of build him up, get him stronger, and work on that. So I don't think Tyreek Stevenson's job is in danger because of Za Frazier. I think it's in danger because if he comes in thinking, oh, he was a second round pick and the GM is still here, so he'll keep his roster spot, whatever. He's got to come in here. He's one of those guys I talked about. Got to come in here, head on straight, focused, and ready to battle because it's going to be open competition. And he could excel in this defensive scheme, right? He's more of a press corner. And that's one of the reasons why I like Terrell Smith more than Stevenson coming out in that draft, because Smith was more of that zone corner, a guy that did a great job of letting everything kind of in front of him, just transitioning downhill and wrapping up tackle. Stevenson was more of a press corner. So I think, with Allen coming in, I think this is a boost, if you will, for Tyreek Stevenson, because this scheme plays better to him, right? So I think that's something that where if he comes in head on straight, put last year behind him, and just focus on what he's doing here with his technique and learning this defensive scheme, I think Stevenson could be one of these guys that benefits from Dennis Allen being the new defensive coordinator.
Raheem Sanders, KQ, is asking about one of the UDFAs. Have you had a chance to look at him at all?
I had not, but he's from South Carolina. He got picked up. I want to say I saw him sign for another team, so he's no longer a UDFA.
What about the thought of moving Smith to safety because he's a zone guy? J2K is asking.
Terrell Smith?
Yeah.
Huh? I'm trying to think. I don't believe he played safety in Minnesota. I think he was a corner. I mean, you could try it. I don't know. I mean, at this point right now, that's another position that he brings up. J2K brings up. That's a position that you and I thought, although going into the draft, that sneaky important position. Mm-hmm. A lot of question marks about health there, maybe age. They didn't do anything at safety. So another position I was looking at in terms of free agency, there's Julian Blackmon, the Colts safety, who's out there as free agent. Justin Simmons is out there from the Falcons as a free agent. Now, would he want to come in and guarantee a starting spot? That's probably out of the question because you have to come in here and probably battle to start here. So we'll see if they pick up a veteran here in free agency in terms of safety. Now, they did bring up a couple of undrafted free agents that intrigued me a little bit. I'm doing some work on those guys, and I hope to have a report on the undrafted free agents coming up on Shimon Draft Scout. But this kid from Oregon, Tysheem Johnson is a guy that decent size, started at Ole Miss, transferred over to Oregon, and also Major Burns. Now, if you're a safety, I don't know if you want to have a name Major Burns. That's a little rough, but all joking aside, 3-year starter, started his career at Georgia. So, these guys are highly recruited, highly talented kids. 3-year starter for LSU, 33 career start. So these are two guys I'm going to put under the microscope for Shimon Draft Scout and have a scouting report produced here in the near future, along with, since we're on the undrafted free agents, if you don't mind, Aldo, North Carolina, Power Echols is a guy that the 3-year starter, had back-to-back seasons a couple years ago of over 100 tackles. So he's a guy that intrigues me. And it's Cal edge guy, Xavier Carlton, big lanky kid, 6'6", 273, 34 and 5/8 inch arm length, 1.76 10-yard split. Not very athletic in terms of bendy, below the waist, more of a real skinny lower half, show some stiffness, but he's a guy at 273. When they line him up wide at Cal and more of a 9 technique and let him go, he's a straight line athlete. He's a good straight line athlete. So when you let him go straight at an angle at a quarterback, he showed the ability to be able to press and to convert speed to power and get after the quarterback. Had 9 sacks last year, if I'm not mistaken. 9 sacks last year, 11 tackles for loss. So he was productive for Cal. So he's a guy that intrigues me. Also, kind of watching him a little bit, maybe you can add 10 pounds and kick him inside to a defensive tackle, big, long defensive tackle inside with that big, radius, wingspan, if you will, put up his hands and maybe not bat some balls down at the line of scrimmage. So Xavier Carlton is another guy that intrigues me that I look to do some more work on.
Excellent. And thank you, Chubbs, for the donation, $2. He says, this is the dead time, worst time of the year. You know what, Chubbs? I agree. But after the draft, there is news that will come out of Hallis Hall with all the OTAs. So we'll stay on top of that. We'll also find some other things to talk about. Right now, I'm working with Bears Country Productions. I'm doing something about the 85 Bears. This, of course, is the 40th anniversary of that team. So we'll have some interesting things coming up a little bit outside the box, since there won't be a lot of current news coming out of Hallis Hall. All right, some more questions for you, Danny. D. Starren asked a question that is kind of a philosophical question. When will the coaching staff not have a clean slate with the players? How long before they know and trust the players? I got to believe that this coaching staff is in that process now, and they want to get there as quickly as possible up until like week one. In week one, they are hoping to get an allegiance with players who are totally on board with everything that's being preached about running hard when you're not the primary receiver, about doing all the little things and stuff. And if it's not there, then we're not going to have a winning season this season. And, Ben Johnson is going to want to get rid of a lot of players. That's how I read that, Danny. What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of two different angles I read it. So first of all, I read in terms of the player himself. So for example, DeAndre, Stevenson, the corner, right?
Sure.
He's a guy had a horrible year last year, right? With the whole Washington game and everything like that. Clean slate, meaning that you come in now, forget what happened last year. It's a whole new staff. Go in and prove to these guys that you believe you should be the starter. You're a high level, high capable player. Same thing with Zach Pickens. Same thing with some of the other the offensive linemen. If you want, just come in here and just prove that you are, the player that should be on this roster, either starting or being the first in line in terms of backup. So that's a clean slate for the players. Now, in terms of the coaching staff, obviously, the one thing that Johnson said earlier was like, when he comes in, him and the staff are going to set the culture, because that's the most important thing when you're building a football team is that culture. And when you set the culture, and then the players know what to expect day in and day out. Right, there isn't going to be any crazy radical changes here and there, and the coach is not going to flap the handle one week and then be your buddy the next week, and so on and so forth. Once you set the culture and players know what to expect, and now the players that you've deemed the leaders, the captains of the team, they then pick up from there, and they run the culture. They run the locker room, right? Whenever you have a team that the coaches are running the locker room or the culture, that's usually a bad sign. So you want the culture set by the coaching staff, and then you want the players to pick up on it, and you want the players then to run the locker room. And I think once that transition happens, then you have buy-in trust from both the players and the coaches. And I think it takes maybe a half year to a whole complete season to get that, if you want it, 100% or whatnot. But so that two different angles, right? The player in terms of the clean slate, come in and prove to us what you have. We weren't here last year. None of these coaches were here last year for the most part. I think only one was retained or two. But let's start off new. Prove to us what you got. And in terms of the players and the coaches, the staff themselves, they got to prove to the players, hey, we know what we're doing. This is how we want it done. This is our culture, and improve them week in, week out, that you're not going to put them behind the 8 ball and put them in positions where the previous staff had done, losing games, and show them how to win games. And I think then you get buy-in from the players, and now you have the staff, and now you have the culture kind of picking up from there. And I think that's when you have the team, you see them getting better and better and better and more confident as weeks go on.
I've said it many times. I've been a fan of this team since the late 1960s, when as a kid I started following the Bears on TV. And the only time I've experienced a Super Bowl winner was when we had a head coach who was cleaning out the locker room of a player named Ricky Watson, throwing his stuff out into the hallway and saying, "You're off the team." That type of discipline and anger from a head coach really works with these alpha personalities. I would not advise that guy, Mike Ditka, to be the CEO of a company or the manager of a McDonald's and stuff. But in pro football, you need that tough love. And what happens as a result of that? You start playing better. You start playing more disciplined. You start winning games. And that love that exists between player and coach becomes intensified, because all of the tough words that came from a head coach start to materialize into wins. And hopefully Ben Johnson has some of that. And it does appear that he does. It appears like he's got an edge.
Well, and that's called accountability. Although what Ditka did was that's holding the player accountable. Was he asleep at the meeting? I forgot the story in terms of was that's why Ditka went off on him because he fell asleep.
Ricky Watts fell asleep in the meeting. Yeah.
Also, didn't John Roper, linebacker, also fall asleep in the meeting? That's why he was traded.
Yes, that is true.
So, but that's again, what did the players do last year? They kept saying we want to be coached hard. The 8 or 10, 15, whatever captains they went to the offensive coordinator and said, "Coach us hard. We want you to coach us." I mean, that right there was and we talked about it before 55. That like made my eyes pop out of my head. Like, how do players go tell the coaches coach us and coach us hard? So there was no accountability on that team last year or under that previous regime. I think again, that's what it is. It just build that trust, build that culture, and hold players accountable. If a player messes up in practice, or rerun the play, or hold that player accountable, and don't brush it under the rug and let things build. And that's what happened last year. I think it was probably happening, years prior to as well. They kept brushing things off and not holding players accountable and not really, following through and all this stuff. And it kept building and building. And that's why we saw Jalen Johnson explode in that locker room, after that Thanksgiving game. And a lot of other players were getting upset after the Washington game when the coach got out there and basically blamed the team or blamed the player or whatever, didn't take accountability for that. So, there was no accountability. The culture sucked. And I think that's where you saw a shattered locker room and a coaching staff that had no control over their players in the locker room.
Yeah, you said it probably happened under other coaches. And Matt Nagy, when I was out at a training camp watching his practices, it was much more of a country club atmosphere where guys were not hitting hard. And, we all know the story. Nagy didn't play his starters in regular season games, and they got off to slow starts during the season. So hopefully Ben Johnson is paying a lot of attention to this. He's an analytics guy. He's paying attention to the health of the players through analytics, but also knowing that this is a rough game and you got to hit in practice. You gotta be ready, and you gotta play on that verge of crossing that criminal line, but not totally cross it, because we don't want to be fined 15 yards and have a player thrown out of the game.
That's a good point with Nagy. So that's the one thing that concern that I had with a first-time head coach who was a successful offensive coordinator. Not that Nagy was as successful as Ben Johnson, but still, kind of similar in terms of play caller, blah blah. The one thing with Ben Johnson is Nagy made the mistake of, he came in thinking, his offense was his thing. He was brought in here to call these great plays and design these big plays and all that stuff. And I think he lost the fact that he was going to get pulled in a million directions. I mean, there's stuff that head coaches get pulled into that we don't even know about in terms of the media, in terms of, fan stuff, in terms of charity stuff, in terms of other stuff with the team. I got to meet with the trainer. You got to meet with this guy. You got to meet with that guy. But Nagy came in as like, I'm just going to call him a great offense. I'm going to build this team, blah, blah. And I think he lost. His offensive coordinator was, and I forgot the name, although is the former Oregon head coach. I don't know if you guys remember it.
Yes, the guy who was the head coach of Philadelphia Eagles.
No, it was head coach of Oregon, the University of Oregon. Something
with an H.
Yeah. So he didn't even know him. He didn't even know him. I think he was a Trace Armstrong guy as well. So, and then the one thing that Mark Helfrich, thank you, David. Thank you, Mark Helfrich. That's who it was. And he brought him as the offensive coordinator. And so what I'm trying to say is Nagy took on everything. He took on the play calling. He took on the building the offense, creating the offense, took on being head coach. I think what I hope Ben Johnson is doing is not taking all that on, because he was a great offensive coordinator for Detroit, but being a great offensive coordinator, play caller here, and designer here, and a coach, that's a lot for someone to take on. So with Declan Doyle, someone who looks like he's smart and very well versed in terms of how to coach speak and everything like that, I think he's going to give him a lot of the the daily, if you want, the grind work, right? The grunt work, during the week, where he's digging up film and pulling up plays and clips and doing this and doing that and putting together the practice, schedule, and putting together, help putting together the game plan. And then so now Johnson can go and do his coaching duties, but he still has trust and faith in a young guy like Declan Doyle, who's coming up in the ranks, who's willing to do all the, if you want to call it, administrative work, right, that head coach has to do, and then build it. And now Ben Johnson comes in, and he kind of overlooks anything. All right, nope, this play I don't want. This play I want. Find this play against Detroit 2 years ago. Let's put that in there. And I think that's where I'm hoping, right? Well, the proof will be in the pudding. We'll see what happens this year. But I'm hoping that's where Ben Johnson is more prepared, as opposed to other offensive coaches that take over a head program because of their play calling duties. Like a guy, Liam Cohen, the guy from the Jacksonville Jaguars, successful offensive coordinator, first time head coach. His majority of his staff are all young, the first time NFL coaches. So curious to see how that dynamic plays out. That's the one thing I always worry about is these first time offensive callers, play callers, if you will, quarterback whisperers, whatever you want to call them, is how they handle the pressures of designing the offense, calling the plays, and being an overall head coach. Hopefully Johnson has learned from his from previous experiences and maybe has given Declan Doyle a lot of that stuff, or maybe even given Antwan Raymond, because he did mention that the title of associate head coach that Randall L has is going to play a part. His hands is going to be Antwan Randall. His hands are going to be on all aspects of the team as the associate or assistant head coach.
Great stuff. Kay also has a great thought here. One of Ben's toughest jobs will be to get Caleb to throw in structure, get that habit in place. Danny, I think now that the draft is over, this is the number one thing that's going to be on my mind for the next several months. I really do believe that if Caleb Williams cannot master throwing in structure and just doing a 3-step drop off a center, planting that back foot, firing that ball, 5-step drop, the same thing, all of the things that a on-time quarterback has to master. If he can't do this year, the only way the Chicago Bears will get to the playoffs is if they start to treat Caleb Williams like the Eagles have treated Jalen Hurts, meaning really rely on the run game and have the passing game to a minimum. You're nodding your head, so you agree.
Yes, I agree. And you said a key phrase there, Aldo, under center, come out, play action, 1, 2, 3, bam, that ball's got to come out. That's it. It's got to come out. And you told them, like, this is their progression. This is how you got to go, and you got to make a decision. That when that third foot drops or whatever, if you're doing a five-step drop or 7, when that back foot hits, ball's got to come out. And I think that's where Ben Johnson has to drill that into Caleb. And I think putting him under center, which is something that we called up for a long time ago, is going to be key. I think play action is going to be key. Run game. And the other thing with Ben Johnson, I think if Caleb's having a bad game, where he throws her off or he's just off the mark, I think Ben Johnson is not afraid to just, do the, handoff and just rely on the running attack and then do some of these quick plays, right? Which is a quick hitter in the flat to Colston Montgomery or Colston Loveland or a Cole Komet or even like a quick, a slip screen to Burden or DJ Moore and some of these quick hitting plays to get Caleb on track and get his rhythm on track. I think that's going to be key here. So, you have a offensive mind head coach who's done this before in terms of play calling, who, knows how to work with these quarterbacks. And I think getting them in a rhythm and utilizing the run game in play action and some of these, getting the ball out of his hands quickly and just less thinking. I think that's going to help Caleb, and hopefully he gets him in rhythm. And then we see him progress. But yes, under center, timing in terms of 1, 2, 3, bam, the back foot hits, the ball's got to come out. I think those are all paramount and all key for Caleb's development.
Indeed. I want everyone who's watching us live, and we've got 442 people watching us live across all our 3 platforms, those on Facebook, those on X, head over to YouTube. And those of you watching now on YouTube, head over to Shimon Draft Scouts, all one word, SHIMON. You see it on the screen there, Shimon Draft Scout, and subscribe to Danny's channel. He's continuing to load videos on the undrafted free agents. He'll be providing analysis of those. Danny, what else are you planning during the off season, or are you going to be like me, sipping a pina colada by a pool somewhere?
No, I wish I had the Aldo Gandia money bank. I can go sip pina coladas by the pool, but no. So I'm going to finish the draft class, posting my scouting reports and videos on the rest of the remaining draft class. Then I'm going to have the some of these undrafted free agents that kind of intrigue me. We'll post those as well, and then we'll take a little bit of a hiatus, or for maybe like a couple of weeks, maybe step away a little bit, decompress a little bit. But like I said earlier, I already got my 100 top 20 players for next year's draft. So I'll wait a little, maybe a month or so, because if not, I believe my girlfriend will leave me if I dive right back into it. So, I got to spend some time with her and the family, and then just start getting prepared. Not a deep dive. Obviously, the top 120 can change. We've seen it before, right? Guys are number one going into the season, and next thing you know, they're Luther Burden, top receiver coming into this past season, goes in the second round. So we all the time. So we'll just do that and just slowly then rev up. Obviously, as training camp starts, then I start going from my scouting hat over to my analyst hat and start breaking down some Bears position battles possibly in camp, and then look at the preseason. And next thing you know, it's week one, and myself, John, and Alyssa are predicting the Bears to go 10-7 again, or 11-6 or something like that.
KQ says you've got a great channel.
Thank you,
and one of the things that we have to do during this off season is get you with J2K and some of our other guys who do outstanding citizen scouting job, and just do a show where you guys do a panel discussion, 4 or 5 of you guys talking about philosophy of scouting, past drafts, what's worked, what hasn't worked, looking forward to the next draft. I mean, there's already Justin Reed, former Barroom Network, has already posted a 2026 mock draft for on ESPN. That's ridiculous, but but it's fun. It's fun for a lot of us. So
those are more so to get people to kind of the names out there, right? So people who are not don't follow college football, 24/7 say, all right, okay, this is a quarterback that I should keep an eye on, and this is a offensive lineman I should keep an eye on. So I think those are why those are out there. But yeah, I would love to get with J2K and Vizzo Joe and anyone else who wants to jump in, and we can talk football, we talk draft, we can talk, pina coladas by the pool with Aldo.
There you go. I know how to mix a perfect pina colada. Trust me. I really, really do. Danny, anything else regarding the NFL draft? I mean, there's other topics we can discuss. I'd love to get your thoughts on Shedeur Sanders. What happened there, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's funny how something happens and then there's always the details kind of come out, right? And I think even Shedeur kind of admitted that he mishandled the pre-draft process. And I think from all accounts, credible reporters are saying that he went in there kind of thinking that they could dictate where they're going to go, whether that was his agent, whether it was his dad, or whether it's whoever it was. He had a little bit of a laissez-faire, if you will, attitude about it. The one thing I heard, I'm not sure if you heard this as well, but the Giants really, they drafted they scouted every single game he played. I mean, they had scouted every one of his games. They were at his pro day, and Brian Daboll was very, very. If you remember last year in the offseason thing where they're interviewing the quarterbacks, Jaden Daniels and even Caleb, Brian Daboll is a very strict in terms of he gives you a play and he wants you to to talk you out and kind of distract you or whatever, and he wants you to kind of reset that play again. And I think from reports or Shedeur just bombed that he bombed that test, and I guess Daboll gave him some crap for it, and Shedeur kind of gave it back. So I think that kind of took him off the Giants list there as well. And obviously, and then obviously the Giants moved on, right? And then they fell in love with Jackson Dart during the process, and that's why they move up and get Jackson Dart. So I think it was a combination of a bunch of things. But he went in the 5th round. He didn't get the money he thought he was going to get. But the one thing with Shedeur, I think he landed in the perfect situation for him. To be honest with you, I think Cleveland doesn't have a clear-cut starter. I think obviously drafting Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round was a head scratcher for me. I mean, he's a guy 5'10", 5'11". Got a good arm. He's a winner, 60 starts, but I think that was a bit of a high reach there for him. They had a lot of picks, but whatever. So they have 2 rookie quarterbacks coming in, Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. They have Joe Flacco there, and they have Kenny Pickens, right? So I think that's the best opportunity for Shedeur to go in there and say, all right, listen, I was drafted in the 5th round, but I'm a starting NFL kind of quarterback, and he's got an opportunity there to go and win there. So I think Shedeur, the process sucked, and he paid for it. But I think he ended up in the best possible situation for himself in terms of getting an opportunity to go and actually, playing early on, and he with a great head coach, great play caller, and Kevin Stefanski as well. So I think that's huge there. In terms of the draft, one thing I want to talk about, Aldo, is the NFC North. I think going through some of our teams in the North, and I was kind of looking at once the dust settles, right? You want to take a look and see like who did well and who helped themselves well. And I'm going to tell you, like for a team that, if I just went off of guys that I liked, I think the team that did well is the Detroit Lions. And Don Burr, if you're out there, I know you're out there somewhere, Don Burr.
No, he's not allowed here anymore.
He's under his burner account. He's not under Don Burr anymore. But
correct.
I really like the Lions draft. I mean, all right, Tyreek Williams, defensive tackle, Ohio State. This guy's going to come in week one and help their run defense. Him and Liam McNeil are going to do a great job in plugging it. He's got potential to be even better in terms of as a pass rusher. So that's a good pick. Tate Ratledge was just a hard-nosed guard from Georgia. I think obviously with some of the defections in Detroit, he can come in as a backup and then probably even replace Christian Mahogany, which is I think it was a third-round pick from Boston College a couple years ago. Isaac Tesla, although we talked about him, he was one of my day 3 gems. Went a little bit higher than I thought he was going to go, third round. But again, a guy 6'4", runs a 4.4 40, tough, will go ahead and block, in the slot. And I think that brings that added element of speed to Detroit. A good natural hands catcher. I think he can only get better. He started off at a small school, transferred to Arkansas. I think he's going to get better in terms of, work on his craft and being a better route runner, so on and so forth. And Miles Frazier, I love Miles Frazier. And that's a guy that in the 4th round that I wish the Bears could have gotten. And again, left guard, play right guard for LSU, but could play right guard, could play some right tackle if you need. As a guy that really is a mauler in the run game, and I think he is going to be a hell of a pickup there for Detroit. Ahmed Hassani, he's a kid from Boise State. Started off late. I think it was junior year. He started in high school, started playing football, really raw. But he caught my eye at the East West Shrine game. His ability, undersized, about 6'2", but 32 to 33-inch arm length, but plays with a high motor, intense player, really productive at Boise State the last couple of seasons. So both in tackles for loss and in sacks. So I think he's a guy that could get a chance there to go on and do something. Dan Jackson, a very underrated safety for Georgia, a walk-on basically, and ended up being a starter this past year. When he wasn't invited to the combine, but at Georgia's pro day lit it up with, I think, around a 4.41 or maybe even a sub 4.4 40. Physical in terms of his ability and as a run defender. I think he's a guy that's going to probably make a start on special teams. But I think he's a guy that has got a chance to contribute maybe year 2, year 3 in his career. And Dominic Lovett, more of like a smaller receiver from Georgia, but a quick gadget guy. We'll see if he makes the roster. But man, those first 3 or 4 picks really improve their roster overall. Looking at the pack, unless you have a question about Detroit, I can move on to Green Bay.
No, I was just gonna, lament the fact that Miles Frazier, because you talked about him frequently on Draft on Tap, lamenting that he ends up with Detroit, and then this kid Ahmad, I saw him at the combine and how fired up he was during those drills. I said to myself, man, that's a guy I would love to see the Bears capture. But it's the Lions again. So, yeah, every year Brad Holmes does a good job with his picks.
And again, it's the culture, right? They set the culture. Dan Campbell set the culture. And these are the kind of guys they bring in, tough, physical guys that will, will know what their role is, will follow the rules, will keep their nose clean and play hard week in and week out, practice hard. Williams, Tesla, Frazier, Ratledge. These guys are all kind of falling. Hassani, these all fall in that line of that culture, and that's a fit. And that's why you set the culture, you build an organization, a winning organization. And now you just kind of continue to supplement it every year with the draft and with free agency. So, moving on to Green Bay real quick. A little hit or miss for me. Matthew Golden's going to help him. Obviously, the receiver. I think 5'10", 4.3, 9 speed. It's going to be probably, I would assume, primarily out of the slot. Obviously, gives you some big play potential with Christian Watson probably out for this year. Anthony Belton for me was a reach at second round. He's a tackle at NC State, probably going to play guard. They introduced him as a tackle, so that tells me that they plan on playing him at tackle. We'll see how that goes. That's a little bit of a boomer bust for me. Savion Williams, highly talented kid at TCU, big, strong, athletic receiver, can do a lot of things. You can pitch the ball to him out of the backfield, can line him up even as some teams saw him as possible as like a big flex tight end, outside as a receiver. So that's a guy that's getting another speed demon or big body physical player that can add to the receiving core, which is threw me off a little bit because I thought Green Bay, other than obviously Watson being injured, I thought they were set a receiver. Next thing you know, they go take 2 receivers in the first 3 picks. So that's a little bit threw me off.
Cliff said that at the same time you were saying it.
Oh, okay. All right. Great minds think alike, Cliff.
There you go.
And then obviously Baron Sorrell is more of that edge kind of 3-4 outside linebacker. We'll see how he fits there. Same thing with Colin Oliver. Warren Brinson is a guy that intrigued me as possible defensive tackle here from Georgia for the Bears, but he's probably going to play a 5 technique there for them. And Micah Robinson, the corner from Tulane, and John Williams was a tackle, Cincinnati, probably going to play guard. So we'll see how that goes there as well. But a little bit hit or miss for me with Green Bay, but I definitely liked Detroit's draft. And in terms of Minnesota, they only have 5 picks, I believe it was. I think 3 or 4 picks. No, they have 5 picks. So Donovan Jackson, another guy that I liked. I thought he was a 2nd-round player, but he goes here in the 1st round. He's a guy that plays left guard, physical in terms of the run game. When Josh Simmons went down last year, he kicked out to left tackle, and then Ohio State didn't skip a beat there. Ty Felton was a receiver from Maryland. Really a kind of dynamic, big play, twitchy receiver. He's going to help them there in terms of that, some depth there. Tyron Ingram Dawkins, another one of my day 3 gems, goes here. And I think he's a guy that another one of these Georgia players that's very talented, size, length, athletic ability, was part of that rotation. Play some end, could be a 4-3 defensive end, could kick inside a defensive tackle. Obviously with Minnesota, I believe he'll be a 5 technique there, but definitely a guy that intrigues me in terms of traits and potential to get better at the next level. Kobe King from Penn State, I didn't really dig into his tape that much. But he's a Penn State linebacker. Typically, those guys are at least worst case scenario, they probably a good special teams player. And then Gavin Bartholomew, the tight end from Pittsburgh, another one of these guys get lost in a deep tight end class. Numbers aren't great, but he's a guy that again plays hard. Competes in terms of as an inline blocker. Also, when you kick him outside as well. So some intrigue there, but definitely by far, in my opinion, I think Detroit had a very good, impactful draft from top to bottom.
I agree. Detroit, I'm just I have a lot of respect for how they've handled the draft since Brad Holmes has been there and maybe a little before then. They finally are getting it right. It's going to be interesting, though, to see what happens with that team in 2025 now that Ben Williams and Aaron Glenn are both gone. And Campbell has said that he's going to do more of the offense in terms of scheming things and calling plays and stuff like that. He said that's where I came from. So it's almost like he was saying, I can do this as good as Ben. That's going to be the big question mark for the Detroit Lions. They've got a good roster. They've got some holes, but the coaching change could be the biggest story there.
That's interesting. I don't know. He's taking, so Dan Campbell's taking over play calling now?
He didn't announce exactly that he was going to do the play calling because this was a press conference before they hired their offensive coordinator, so I haven't heard anything since. Okay. But immediately after Ben Johnson left to the Bears, Campbell said, I'm gonna take a bigger role in the offense. That's where I came from, play calling, scheme, and everything. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. And then with the Packers, you brought up a really interesting thing regarding the Green Bay Packers. You asked me to pull this. You want to lead into it in any way?
Yeah. So obviously, you guys remember when Ben Johnson instructed interview, a press conference, to say, he threw a shot at the bow, if you will, at Matt LaFleur, talk about he likes beating the Packers twice a year. And I'm like, typical new Bears coach. They come in like, I remember Lovey talking about it, he put beating the Packers twice a year, right before winning the Super Bowl. So obviously, all right, he's playing to the fan base and obviously, paying homage to the rivalry. And then Ben Johnson did it, right? And I'm like, okay. So I'm like, he's probably just messing around with LaFleur because they probably have some sort of relationship or whatever, two young, play designers, play callers. And then this thing happened where I saw on the internet. If you want to go ahead and play it,
here it comes.
Do you have beef with Coach Johnson?
I was waiting for this. I don't know Ben Johnson.
So do you have beef?
Do I have beef? I don't know Ben Johnson. I respect him as a football coach. He did a nice job.
Yeah, but do we not feeling the same thing right now?
Yeah, well, yeah.
But if you don't know him, why is it tight in here?
It's not tight. I'm not tight. I thought it was interesting.
What was interesting?
I thought the press conference was interesting, but I don't have beef with them.
And to be quite frank with you, I kind of enjoyed beating Matt LaFleur twice a year.
I don't get it all into that stuff. I thought it was.
But you'll harness it.
He'll see the eye emojis after a win. You'll send.
I don't have his number, so that won't happen.
You gonna Jim Harbaugh him after a game?
No,
you beat him?
I would never do that.
Do you have the strength to do that?
I don't know. Probably not. Apparently not. Apparently not.
No, I'd never do that. Do you?
That was good stuff.
So okay. Apparently, obviously, it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but I'm like watching. I'm like, he doesn't know Ben Johnson. Doesn't have his number. There's no relationship here. So Ben Johnson took a shot at an opposing division coach they had no relationship with. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, and then it looked like LaFleur's a little peeved, like like kind of like one of those Will Smith, keep my name out your mouth kind of moments there. And so is Ben Johnson like starting something here?
The impression that I got was that was Ben Johnson's Lovie Smith moment when Lovie said we will beat Green Bay. He was made aware of that, and perhaps, and he wanted to come up with something himself because he knows that rivalry with the Packers. He knows, that it's really important to Chicago to beat that team. Plus, they're like-minded. They're considered offensive geniuses. LaFleur is considered a genius, and now Ben Johnson. So I think that was a little bit on the theatrical side, but there is, clearly some animosity, and I want to show you I'm the better coach kind of thing.
But the one difference, though, Aldo, is Lovie said the Bears organization wants to beat the Packers organization. Johnson made it personal. He said, he made it, he made no, I'm going to beat him twice a year. So that's like, whoa. So I don't know if anything happened between Green Bay and Detroit when they played him. I know he was successful. Obviously, Ben Johnson was successful with Detroit, beating Green Bay. But it's like, do you want to start something with a guy that's, is Ben Johnson running checks that his team can't cash? I guess that's the question. I'll
tell you one thing. That's I got to give the guy credit. He's walked in with some big cojones, and he's hopefully what you said is right. Hopefully, he can cash those checks.
Because for a guy who was quiet, like no one ever heard of Ben Johnson. Like you knew he was this mad scientist, and up until I guess his introductory press conference, I never really heard him talk, full sentences. And then all of a sudden, he's everywhere. He's on every single TV program. He's talking schmack to Matt LaFleur. He's studying his president. Okay, now I can see it like, all right, he's trying to motivate his team. Say, all right, this is how we're going to do it. I'm putting my foot down. I'm believing in you guys. Blah blah blah. We talk about setting that culture, and is this the culture he wants to set? Like, obviously, he came from Dan Campbell, right? He saw that grit and that all that tough talk and everything like that, and biting kneecaps and all that stuff. And what was that? Was that his biting kneecaps moment? I don't know. I just to go personally at LaFleur. Again, not knowing him, I thought, oh, these guys are friends. They have a relationship.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
When I heard that, I'm like, whoa, they don't know each. And then LaFleur's pissed. So there's going to be that if I'm the NFL, week 1, Bears Packers, I would put it out there and everyone can talk about it. That's what I would do if I'm the schedule maker. So we'll see how it goes. But
I'm with you, man. I can't wait for that schedule to release. I think it'll be in about 10 days or so.
May 14th.
May 14th. There you go. So May 14th. So 14 days, right? Yep. So any other last thoughts, Danny? I mean, this has been a great season. We consciously made the decision to reduce the amount of shows for Draft on Tap. I don't know if it made the show better or not, but I certainly felt like you did a phenomenal job of covering these potential Bears candidates. Kudos to you. And I'd like to do it again next season in the same kind of format.
Let's do it.
All right.
So let's bring it back. Yeah, it's been awesome. It's been great. Obviously, the interaction with the fans has been sensational. Developing the YouTube page and having everyone's support has been great as well. And obviously your support too, Aldo, and giving us this platform to talk about this. But yeah, I mean, this is something that I love to do. It's a passion. I've been digging into tape since December, January of obviously of last year. And I was telling my girlfriend the other day, I'm like, I just feel like I'm always not. I haven't seen everybody I should see. And she's like, you've been doing this since like December or January. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I just feel like there's more and more. There's more prospects I got to find. There's more people, player tape I got to see. And so she drives her a little. She's like, you're like, she doesn't get it. But this is a passion of mine, and she understands that it's a passion of mine, and she's very supportive of it. But like, just to sit here and just kind of watch these tapes over and over again. Now it's like I was telling her too. I'm like, it's a little thing where I feel like, because I've been doing it for like 4 months now, almost 5 months, like a little piece is missing now. Like I lost a friend or lost a puppy, or, so you get that little, mourning, like you're in a state of mourning a little bit. And then obviously you move on and get over it. Now start revving up take a little break and then start revving up again for next year.
Well, what has to be the best about what transpired this draft season is that you and your son started doing coaching together. He started helping you with the cut-ups, huh?
Yeah, he's all into Madden, and like he already pre-ordered the 2026 Madden. He's waiting. When the player was drafted, he does this thing called Ultimate Team where you get these cards, and you create teams from that. And he's like, all right, so as soon as Cam Moore was done, bam, his card was ready. And so the next day he had a 99 Cam Moore card, a 99 Travis Hunter card, and he's already ordered Travis Hunter Jacksonville Jaguars jersey. So he wanted Travis Hunter jersey from Colorado. I just couldn't find it for him for last Christmas, but so he got himself that. Yeah, so he's into. He actually told me, what was it, like a couple weeks ago? He's like, once the draft's over, like, what are you gonna do for football? He goes, when's football gonna come back? I'm like, it's gonna be a while, buddy. It's July's training camp, and August is preseason games, and then finally, September. So it's gonna be a while.
Well, let's see if we can get some tickets to get the two of you guys out to Bears camp and see the Bears practice. That'd be a great thing. I really love to see you and your son.
Yeah, he would love to go for sure.
Yeah, outstanding. Meanwhile, your daughter is wondering when Daddy's gonna take her to the park.
My daughter's a junior high school. She's got her own world. She's in theater. She works. She's learning to drive. She might be getting a license here soon. And next thing you know, she's got her own. She had her own group of friends. I'm not.
Yeah, that
I'm just glad when she needs me to. For some money.
My biological daughter, but probably freshman year of high school, she was like, "Okay, Dad, I don't need you anymore. I got my friends." Okay.
Right, once she got the job and she has friends who drive, so she's like, "Oh, Dad, I'm going to go with my friends for dinner tonight." All right.
Indeed. All right, everybody, will do it for our last episode of Draft on Tap for this season. The invitation is still out to J2K and other people who are interested in talking draft with Danny. I can set it all up. Just, where to find me, at Barroom Network on Twitter. If you need my email, it's aldobarkeeper@gmail. Tell me at gmail.com. Tell me you're interested in doing a show with Danny and just talking football for 90 minutes to 2 hours, and we'll make that happen here on both outlets, the Shimon Draft Scout YouTube channel and the Barroom Network. So Danny, any final words before we head out?
It's been great. I think the Bears did well in this class. Obviously there's always going to be questions in terms of, you got this, go this way. We'll find out. But I think this is a draft where I left, like I said earlier, there's a couple of eyebrow raisers, but is more so, didn't take a running back until 7th round, and also that the linebacker in 4th round. But other than that, it was like, I can see the fit, I can see the player, I can see the vision. That's the most important thing, right? Is this coaching staff appears to have a vision for how they're going to utilize these players, how they're going to coach them up. And now the tough part starts. Now you develop them. You got the talented players in there. Now let's develop them. Let's get them better. Let's see Shemar Turner become a pass rushing 3 technique. Let's see what job Frazier turns into in terms of, is he a press cover corner? See what Al Harris does, and I think that's going to be the fun part, and seeing these guys developing and get better here as the season progresses.
Indeed, I agree with every word. All right, we'll leave you with probably the best moment of the draft from this past weekend, and we'll see you all again soon.
Green Bay, Wisconsin! Is that all you got? Come on, you can be louder than that! I know y'all mad because championship gold looks good on the blue and orange. But in all seriousness, Green Bay, we are in the shadow of Lambeau Field. And I love Lambeau Field because the king of the North, the best quarterback in the NFC North, Caleb Williams, is undefeated at Lambeau Field.
Woohoo!